I'm here with Dr. Allison Justice at the CoNNect event. We're here in Sacramento today. How are you doing?
I am doing awesome. I'm very glad to be here.
Excellent. So yeah, we're doing this new format where we're interviewing the panelists. So tell me a little bit about yourself.
Okay, so I'm from the East Coast. I came out to California and worked for about 4 years in the cannabis industry. So I got some of my stripes,
Right.
And then went back to South Carolina. My whole background is in ornamental crop production.
Wow.
But science focused. And so now in South Carolina, technically under the hemp bill, I have a research lab. And so we do a lot of research, everything from nutritional studies to lighting studies. We collaborate with a lot of the universities and work with some of their grad students to help push some of this hard data science, taking the things that the community is finding and achieving in beautiful strides,
Right.
and just trying to put some of the data behind it to help keep moving forward.
Really cool. So yeah, that's interesting. We're going from cut flowers and ornamentals to cannabis.
Yeah.
And then, the hemp bill is wonderful because then we're allowed to work with people in every state.
Right.
And as far as we're data collection, I do the same thing. So we're under a hemp format and it's pretty amazing. So tell me about your favorite flavor profile.
This is a hard one because my nose says something different than my lungs.
Right.
Okay. So my favorite smell is terpene. So a lot of the jacks.
Yeah, jacks, hazes, sativas that are,
bathe in it. I love it. It says something to me. But then sometimes when I smoke those varieties, it seems a little harsher than some of the other varieties.
Right.
And I've heard that is the case with other folks too and what they experience. So it seems to be a trend. So it's interesting. Like my nose wants those varieties so bad, but then it's a little bit harsher when you smoke.
I love those nose burning varieties. And there's so many different iterations of that, especially in Europe. They're extremely popular over there. And I love it. What's your favorite cultivar?
So it's interesting, being in a hemp state. My breeding goals and varieties I get are a little bit different than what I once experienced in California and what the hype strains are in California now.
Right.
And so I get a little bit different mixture. A lot of 1-to-1s or 4-to-1s or CBG dominant, and so I'm separating aroma and kind of what my nose desires and what my eyes desire with what a bud should look like to what I feel. And so, if I'm working, I need to be I need to concentrate. I can't necessarily go out and grab a 30%er and smoke it.
Yeah.
But I can grab a 1-to-1, hit half.
It might even help with concentration.
Exactly. Do half a joint of a 1-to-1 and I'm golden and I can still hold a conversation.
Totally.
I know a lot of people need a lot higher dosage than that, but
it's so subjective to the individual.
It is 100%.
So and that's an amazing part about it because cannabis in itself is just so subjective. Some people go for the effect. Some people go for the different flavor profiles. There's breeders that breed for effect and there's breeders that breed for flavor and there's people breed for washing and all these other things. But it's so subjective on what quality is. What is one thing you could change about the flavors currently dominating the California scene or the scene in the U.S.?
Okay. So, I think the California scene, to the best of my knowledge, because I haven't lived in California in 6-7 years now. Mm-hmm. But at least to my knowledge, it's a lot of the candies and the cakes and the sweetness, right?
Right.
Is that right?
Oh, yeah. Candy gas, purple candy gas.
And I get it. They smell awesome.
Right.
But, you lose the luster after a while and you want something different. And so, I think that 100% has translated over to, the East Coast, the Southeast, where, the cookies, the sweetness, the cake is, what people are taught to appreciate. Mm-hmm. But I don't feel that's what they should necessarily appreciate because the plant is amazing. I mean, there's tire smells.
There's so much diversity.
There's so many crazy smells. And, that's just what your nose says, not necessarily what that equates to medically.
Right.
To create, that special high or special healing that it needs. So, diversity in general is certainly what I would keep encouraging people to, not even people to keep breeding for, because everybody has their own certain something they're breeding for, but consumers to get it out of their head that, hey, we don't all need the same, Starbucks caramel macchiato. Yeah. We need something different. And there are plenty of things different. And a lot of consumers don't know that.
Well, and if you look at it from an agricultural standpoint, I think if we look at bananas or some of these other fruits, like bananas have been impacted to where we only can produce bananas through tissue culture, and breeding bananas is starting to come back. But like on a global scale, it's just we have one variety of banana for the most part. And that would be terrible if it was cannabis.
Yeah, that would be so terrible. Yeah. So terrible. It's not just taste, it's effect, it's cannabinoid type.
Right.
Terpene type. It's beautiful that we have a plant that has this much expression in so many ways. And
it's more diverse than any other cultivated plant. It's
very special. And so I hope, I know folks like yourself and myself will hold on to that and keep it true. But, converting that to the customer, the consumer is where it's difficult. But
especially
I think we can get there.
Yeah, and especially because I think that people, they want this instant gratification. They don't want to learn how to roll joints, which there's nothing wrong with that, but they want the carts and they want the pre-rolls. And there's benefits to those things too. From my perspective, it's like, okay, so we don't need to worry about what it looks like anymore. We can give them a product that's amazing, that makes them feel good, that makes them taste good. Yes. And so that kind of leads into my next question. As far as what's the most important thing? Effect, flavor, commercial viability. What's your opinion?
That's a hard question.
Yeah. It's almost a trick question.
It is a trick question. It is a trick question because if I'm just simply a consumer and not a grower, right, I'm going to go with what my nose likes.
Yeah.
But that doesn't necessarily mean it's going to give me the effect I want. So having the reps to teach me the effect I want and which road to take me that down could take some time.
Yeah.
And sadly, not a lot of consumers will take the time to kind of understand that whole gamut of what this plant can provide.
Totally.
And, talking in the California market, if you go to a dispensary, it is going to be high THC. And that's great. But not every consumer wants a 30%er,
needs it. Yeah.
Or needs it. And so it's just so exciting how the next 5-10 years are going to turn out and, how this road's going to go. Is it all just going to go to cakes?
Right.
Or
hopefully not. Hopefully,
no. I don't think diversity. It will.
No, I don't think it will. I think we're going to expand on the diversity. I think a lot of people are going to use old school genetics with the new school. That's what I'm doing, and that's what a lot of other breeders that I know that I respect are doing. Trying to get some diversity back in the plant because we need hybrid vigor, and I think those things are important. But to touch on one thing you said about, basically putting in the reps. Because, I call that data point collection. And I think I'm a chef by trade. And so I learned to build my palate, whether it was cannabis or food, from collecting data points. It's a very scientific way of doing it. But you're right. It's all about putting in the reps because the more times you experience stuff, the more data points you have to either tell you, yes, I like this. No, I don't like this. You really can take a scientific approach, whether you're doing a scientific approach or not. I feel like that's a great way to do it.
Exactly. Did this strain make me feel this way because I was having a bad day?
Right.
Or because I've experienced it properly? Yeah,
and if you try it enough times, you really start to understand the plant and how your body reacts to it because our body chemistries are so unique.
Yes.
So thank you very much for your time. I look forward to joining you on the panel.
Same to you.
Thank you. I'm here with Marco from CGO, connoisseur grade only. We keep bumping into each other.
Yep.
How are you doing today?
I'm doing great, man. Just chilling. Can't complain. We're out here, Sacramento, California, the city of trees. We're over here at the Indoor Sun Hydros, one of my favorite spots to come. If you ever need your necessities, this is the place to come.
Dude, in Sac, this is the place, bro. They got everything. It's like the Costco of grow equipment, nutrients, all that stuff.
Definitely, and the staff are very knowledgeable, and they know a lot, so if you have any questions, they're always willing to help you with a lot.
Totally. So we've done podcasts, but just for everybody that's tuning in, tell me about yourself.
Man, what's up, you guys? My name is Marco Sarita. I'm right here from Sacramento, California, the city of trees, one of the best places in the whole United States. Well, anyways, yeah, I come from Sacramento. We're a small independent company. We have a pre-roll company out of Sacramento. We do handmade hash rolls and handmade flower rolls. Yeah.
Really good stuff. And I mean, you're throwing events too. You got Hash Hole Island coming up.
Oh, yeah, man. We got Hash Hole Island coming up May 17th. We're really excited. We got some really cool people coming out to perform. We got some amazing people coming out to, spread light, education, and
podcasts.
Definitely, we got James Lau coming out, man.
Yeah.
He's gonna be spreading some knowledge. Come over by the booth, check them out. Cannabis Brothers as well.
Yeah, it's gonna be epic. I can't wait.
Dude, I'm so excited. We have some really cool little rides. We got some cool little add-ons from different brands that are doing some activations. It's going to be really cool.
Yeah, we're doing some special stuff. Like literally, we're going to have special products out there, seeds and everything else. Hash holes.
Man, some commemorative. So you guys better lock in while you can, man. And it's exciting because we have people coming from all parts of the world in different parts of the nation. So I know they're definitely going to take advantage of the opportunity.
So what is your favorite flavor profile?
Whew, that is kind of tricky because I like a lot of different flavors. But I would say, honestly, one of my favorites are like a nice, like floral, earthy, but it's like more of a smooth, creamy, floral flavor,
Well, and knowing what I know about you now, it's like you're like a mixologist. You love mixing rosin and hash with flour, and I feel like you're an artist in that sense.
Oh man, I do. I love to curate some really cool pairings, because sometimes you get different flour that expresses itself differently with different terpenes. You would think like certain you'd want to pair the same type of terp together. Like sometimes the opposite terpene reacts different with the palate, creating a different effect. Also, like a different flavor and something that you haven't never even experienced. And it's so cool because
it almost gives you a different kind of entourage effect. You start throwing stuff in there, and it's wild. These combinations. We were smoking that Crippy.
Oh man, that Crippy was amazing, man. I ain't gonna lie, I blended some of the Crippy with that the cookies you gave me.
Yeah.
And then I put some of that Skittles fucking Patella.
Yeah.
Fire.
Yeah, that stuff's wild. I love that stuff. I love smoking it. I feel like it's a great way where it's not like Skittles rosin, it's got its own thing. But yeah, favorite cultivar of all time.
Newer or old?
You pick one.
I mean,
you like
because now I feel like
Starburst OG.
I feel like now you got like Skittles as a cultivar now because you have Skittles being crossed with so many different things. And,
totally.
So I mean,
Skittles is special in its own right.
It really is. And there's so many amazing Skittles little crossings. And I can only imagine where it's gonna go in the future. Right. But if for old, I'm not gonna lie, I'd probably go with the OG Kush.
Yeah,
you gotta go
gassy.
with the OG gassy. What was that one? It's like Fire OG.
For sure. So that exactly that real old school fire that's like piney and earthy and a little bit of citrus on it. But the burned down to the roach and it just tasted gassy and amazing.
Definitely,
I love that stuff. So what's one thing you could change about the flavors currently dominating the scene?
Oh man, I mean, I feel like it's diverse when it comes to what's dominating, because you got old strains like Blue Dream last year. That was like one of the top selling pre-rolls and strains.
I heard it just made a comeback too. Like it's coming back. It's the number one product SKU.
That's what I'm saying, and it's so crazy because it's like you can't really dictate what the consumers want. You can only adapt to what they're buying and what they're consuming on a daily,
Right.
So that gives me insight because I'm like, that gives me like, now maybe I need to try some Blue Dream hash holes, something that's going to be different, and so like I know Blueprint has this Blue Dream crossed with the Super Silver Haze. I'm gonna wait for a really good batch of that, and then we're gonna drop some of that.
Sounds fire. I got my Dream Candy, which is Blue Dream times double lemon.
No, I think we're gonna have to run that one too.
We might have to cross that with the Blueprint and do a super collab, bro. Like,
forced collab right there.
It sounds fire.
Oh, that does sound amazing.
Yeah. So, tell me one thing you're looking forward to about tonight.
Bro, honestly, I'm looking forward to everything. You know, it's always a well-rounded show, and it's really executed well. They have amazing brands and different type of growers, cultivators, and different people with a lot of different knowledge within the actual cannabis industry. You know.
Yeah, I love these Connect events. Like, I like the panels. I like the way Serge does it. Shout out to Serge. But yeah, thank you so much for coming on. I look forward to listening to the panel, and I hope everyone checks out the website with CGO. It's going to be epic. I'm here with JP from Good Pizza Podcast. How you doing today?
Doing good, my friend. How are you?
I'm fantastic, dude. You've been world traveling around too. You were in Spain. You were in Miami. You've been all over this year. New
coast
York,
to coast, like space ghosts.
dude. Wild, wild, good times.
Yeah, man.
So for all our listeners and people watching, tell me about yourself.
Oh, I'm just the North Jersey hybrid, an Irish Guinea from North Jersey who loves good food, good company, and good people. Grew up hustling my whole life, bro. Don't come from much, but I made something out of nothing.
Yeah.
And, been in the weed game since 96. 2017, I thought it was time to take my talents out west. I restarted my life in California, built a couple brands. And then during the pandemic, I started my brand, Good Pizza, started the Good Pizza podcast. And the rest, they say, is history.
Dude, you doubled down, not just the podcast, but with the brand and the packaging and the pizza boxes in metric, dude. I mean, I think it's pretty amazing.
Thanks, bro.
And you're working with some really good cultivators. You guys are crushing.
Thank you, bro.
Yeah, you gave me some samples. I don't think I thanked you for the samples that you gave me, but dude, that's fire.
Fire? All right, bet.
Really, really good, man. So tell me about your favorite flavor profile.
Favorite flavor profile? I'm seeing like, I'm gravitating towards like Permy, Biscotti, like type terms, like gassy, but like, I don't know.
Almost musky and earthy.
Musky, earthy, gassy. Of course, I like Z. If you can slide some Z in there in the mix, I'm with that. But yeah, that's what I go back to a lot. You know what I'm saying? Yeah,
me too. I like all those things. Marker is interesting because it breeds really into everything you cross with marker. It's like marker.
Yeah,
it's mostly marker. And there's like hints of other things, but a lot of that stuff is almost like when you're smoking a joint, it's like, oh yeah, that's definitely marker.
For sure.
So yeah, and what is your all-time favorite cultivar?
Honestly, bro, I've been thinking about this for a minute, and I think I changed my Desert Island strain from Skittles to Fugazi, bro.
Wow.
And we don't know what Fugazi is, but I would bet the house that it's a permanent marker cross.
Yeah.
It's Permy. I think it's Perm 41 or Perm Sherb.
Right.
That's my guess.
Nice. So what's one thing you could change about the flavors currently dominating the scene in cannabis?
What I would change? I know the obvious answer is like get rid of the candy, but like I don't hate candy. You know what I'm saying? It's just like it just sucks because that's what you have to sell to make bread a lot of the times. But what I would change is, I just want something new. I want something new that we haven't had. Like, you know what I want? I want ZDP. I want ZDP to hit the market and fuck the world up, bro.
We're about to change the world with ZDP, bro.
I know,
and we just harvested some, and I feel like it was grown by SF Canna.
Nice.
And so they grew it better than I grew it when I pheno hunted it. And I'm like, okay, well, the buds are bigger.
Okay.
And the nose is there. It's like that dead ringer for GDP on the nose, and then you smoke it and it's more candy. So I'm excited about that as well. I feel like it's those, I think those disruptors, right? That's what I'm looking for is new disruptors.
Yeah. And I've been bigging you up and talking about that strain. Any platform I've been on that been asking me, I'm like, yo, y'all ain't ready for ZDP. James now got something cooking.
It's going to be, and they got more color too in Z.
Word.
Yeah. So
nice.
These guys over at SF Canada, shout out, Freddie, Big, Chris, crushing.
Yep.
The team over there is just taking it to the next level.
Fire.
And I mean, we got some ZDP with color, and I'm like, okay, this is a game changer. I think the chocolate runts is another one. That's a chocolate times double lemon cherry, which is a runts S1. So we call it chocolate runts.
Fire.
Ray Bama's checking it out. He was like excited.
Nice, dude.
So so we got a lot of stuff on the horizon. Plus, we're about to do this podcast network, dude. And I think that's going to be a game changer.
Yeah, bro.
I feel like we're the number 2 and number 3 in the space.
Yeah.
And I feel like combined, now we're like the Voltron.
Yeah, for sure.
So that's what's up, And I feel like we're going to be able to work with all these other people too. And I feel like we can elevate people into our space and kind of grow together. And I feel like working with the team, that's where I love that style, and I love that it's not just about myself, that it's about building something up that's much bigger than myself.
Yeah, for sure.
So thank you so much for your time. I look forward to your panel tonight.
Yeah, me too, man. I'm excited.
Right on.
Thanks for having me, bro.
Absolutely.
Peace.
I'm here with Heather from Natura, someone I've talked to on the phone several times, and I'm glad to finally meet you in person today. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. It's been an honor to meet you.
Yeah, same. I've heard you're the big deal over at Natura, and every one of the people that I talk to that brings you up talks very highly of you.
I really appreciate that. Same goes for you as well.
Some of them are even scared of you a little bit. I
Oh
think.
my goodness! Wow. I guess my reputation precedes me.
Totally. So tell me about yourself.
For sure. So I'm Heather Norris. I am the director of R&D and genetics over at Natura. I've been there about 5 years this year, and I have a background in plant sciences with specialization in plant breeding and genetics from UC Davis.
Wow.
Yeah, and in my spare time, I like to go to live shows. I like live music.
Nice.
And I also have a side grow where I do deep water culture, recirculating DWC.
Really cool.
Yeah.
Nice. I love DWC. My friend Master Yoda, Alfred, he was winning cups with DWC back in the day, and game changer.
Oh, it's fantastic. The turnaround time's pretty quick, 8 weeks, and it's in and out.
Yeah.
And the quality,
especially. I think quality.
Unmatched.
Well, and so there's like the big argument between rock wool, soil, and cocoa, and I feel like it has so much more to do with the cultivator than it does with the substrate, that I think it's a lot harder to grow with rock wool. I think it's a lot harder to grow with DWC. But when you grow it at its peak level and you can optimize the plant, I think you can get amazing results.
I agree with that. I very much agree with that. Media grown cannabis is definitely a little more forgiving.
Yeah.
The deep water culture, you have to really know what you're doing. Been doing it for a long time. I'm not going to date myself or anything, but definitely upwards of like 18 years that I've been doing it. Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah. So definitely beautiful quality, beautiful flowers, clean medicine.
Yeah. Do you want to drive a Ferrari or do you want to drive a Honda? And there are nice Hondas. There are
Most
really nice
definitely.
Ferraris.
I do get my fair share of flack from the completely organic guys. They're like, oh, you're one of them. You're a salt grower. Like, hey, don't knock it, brother. Don't knock it till you try it.
Well, I think at the end of the day, show me what you got. Like, put your money where your mouth is. Show me your flower, and then we can talk. Because I think there's amazing living soil growers out there, and I think there's a lot of bad ones.
I agree. You said it earlier. It's about the cultivator.
Yeah.
You can have all the right inputs, and if you don't have the right grower, then you're not going to have good quality.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and at scale, I think it's so much easier once you know how to grow, and I think scaling and crop steering with something like rock wool. I think it's a big game changer as far as predictability and consistency of quality. And so it's just one of those things, and we both work with Grodan.
Yep.
I'm a big fan of Grodan and what they're doing, but I'm also a fan of soil, and I'm also a fan of cocoa. I use Kaya cocoa right now. We're doing a bunch of trials with Kaya, and I absolutely love Kaya. And I love the results we're getting with Kaya.
Yeah, Kaya's great.
So, and I love Synganic too. So I love using salts with soil, and I love using organic, Synganic with cocoa. I mean, I think there's just so many different ways to do it. And to say one way is the best, I think has so much to do with the environment and so many other things than it's like just one way, because there's so many different ways to get results.
There very much is. And, obviously at my job, we cultivate in media, and we're trying to dial in crop steering and doing all of that. And it's a kind of a big joke around there, like, you can't dry back. You can't crop steer in deep water culture, so it's all about the inputs. It's all about keeping everything dialed in, your environment, your VPD, your CO2, your light levels. Like, that's really what it's about.
Every day. And every day is so important. It's like you can screw up and you can recover, but it takes away something from the end product every time. Every mistake you make, it takes away something special.
Most definitely. And it's real easy to do that in deep water culture. Real easy to make a mistake. And
or if your pump goes, you're done.
Oh, that's
there's
it.
So many things.
That's it. So many things. Yeah.
So tell me about your favorite flavor profile.
Ooh. So I am a big gas person. You give me any flavor profile that has a gas to it, whether it's citrusy, whether it's piney, whether
GMO?
it's candy. I am very particular about the GMO.
Yeah.
I am one of those people that kind of err against the GMO, nothing against it. It's just not for my palate.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I think it got played out a little bit. It's like ChemD. It's like a ChemD on steroids is how I describe the nose profile, because I feel like that same profile actually came from ChemD, which it was bred into it, bred into the GMO. But it's this very strong and intense aroma. And it was bred into a lot of stuff because it washes so heavily. A lot of people did crosses with it, and they're all very GMO dominant, especially the ones that dump.
Oh, yeah. And we definitely have some of those genetics that we've dialed in over at Natura as well.
Right.
And I can tell when we're harvesting it. I can tell when I'm walking by a table of it.
Right.
You just can't help but go, yep, that's that.
Yeah. Well, I like Gorilla Glue.
I'm a big glue fan. Yeah. Very much so. The old school lineage, Northern Lights number 5.
Yeah.
Trainwreck, like some of those old school flavors that you don't see.
People keep saying Trainwreck. I keep hearing it, so I feel like someone needs to bring it back. I don't think
will
it's
be that person.
Yeah, you should.
I will.
It's like, but it's an interesting one to grow because it has these golf ball sized buds and this really bad node spacing, and it doesn't look happy.
Right.
But it's also a special plant, and I feel like now is probably a good time to bring it back.
Well, you have to know how to train it, how to treat her properly and kind of start her a little bit shorter because she likes to stretch, right?
Yep.
But I used to have the original Arcata cut back from the 90s.
Oh, yeah.
And that's the one, man.
Yeah.
That's the one. So not to toot my own horn or anything, but I have some homies in the industry that have done some back crosses of the original clone only and selfed it and got some seeds. And so I'm excited to see what comes from that.
Tyson still probably has that cut up in NorCal for sure.
I think so.
Yeah. There's a few people with it, but I mean, even the back crosses, I love it for its strength. Whereas Jack a lot of times wasn't as strong, and then there was Trainwreck that was very strong.
Right. And I've always been slightly partial to that Trainwreck nose over the Jack lineage, just because there's a lot of Jack.
And there are some
out there.
There are some good Jacks out there.
Definitely.
And, it's not all Jacks are created equal.
I have an XJ13, G13.
Dude, XJ is so fire.
I love it. It's one of the staple sativas in my home garden.
Yeah, I did XJ times bubblegum back in the day. And J1 times bubblegum. The J1 times bubblegum was great. It was straight bubblegummy. In fact, I still see it around and people are like, oh, it's J1. I'm like, no, that smells like my J1 bubblegum. But,
Yum.
But anyway.
Sorry, I missed that.
Oh yeah, it's a good one. And it yields. It's really lime green, and so it doesn't get everyone excited.
Of course.
Doesn't have enough color.
Of course, about with their eyes nowadays.
Oh yeah, it's so wild.
Yeah.
So what's one thing you would change about the flavors currently dominating the cannabis scene?
I would definitely try to bring back some of the old school flavors. It's all about the candy right now. And there's nothing wrong with that. I'm a gelato fan. I'm a Skittles fan. I love the candy. Yeah. But it's flooding the market right now. All of last year, anything I heard was, I don't want any of those genetics. I'm looking for candy.
Right.
So we had to tailor our entire genetic profile to sourcing all these candy genetics, running it through our test program, finding what yielded the best, what tested high enough, and that the sales team liked, that the buyers liked.
Right.
Now that we're finally getting that profile around, I'm starting to hear, oh, hey, the buyers are now wanting half non-candy and half candy.
Yeah.
And it's just like when
they don't want all purple, they want a little purple.
Right.
Yeah,
it's too purple. Oh, it's not purple enough. It's too green.
Oh yeah.
It's too big. The nugs are too small.
Now it's too much candy. We need a little less. It has to be candy, but we need less.
Right. So now I'm finally hearing that the market is trending back toward liking non-candies, and I'm excited about that because there's a lot of really good non-candies out there too.
When your company is one of the biggest in California, you guys produce a lot of flowers, so I feel like you have your hand on the pulse pretty good on what people like, what's moving, all those things.
Very much so, yeah. A lot of the lemon cherry gelatos, everybody's wanting some type of iteration of LCG, runts, gelatos, they just don't go out of style. And
why do you think that is?
I think that it has to do with the bag appeal that people visually see because we've transitioned into a market where you're buying with your eyes. You can't smell it. You can't break it open and feel it. You just have to look at it and read what the label says.
Right. Well, I also feel like it's strong. And so the
That's
LCG
true.
is pretty strong.
That's true.
It doesn't wash very well. It doesn't make really good hash. Actually, I take that back. It makes really good hash, but it does not wash very well. I have some in my bag that we tried, and I pressed some hash out of it, and it was really, really good. Full melt, absolutely amazing, but it washes below like 1%.
Right. So there's also that you have to check all of the boxes, especially in the commercial industry. And I think that's the edge that home growers have.
Yep.
Is that they can dial in those boutique and those specialty varieties and really make them shine. And then they're holding on to them for a lot longer than commercial grows are.
How important do you feel flavor is compared to effect, commercial viability, and other factors?
Professionally, they're all about what yields, what looks good, what has that bag appeal and that nose.
Mm-hmm.
Personally, I'm more of a flavor person. I have a saying, the nose knows.
Yeah.
And I can tell when something's going to have that flavor profile. I think my olfactory senses are a little bit heightened, compared to other people, because I can call things out just by the nose of it.
Right.
So definitely the flavor profile, the smell is very important for me. When I'm analyzing somebody else's grow, I like to ask them how it was grown, how it was dried, how it was cured. All of that's very important to the end smokability.
Right.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for your time, and I look forward to your panel tonight.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to sitting with you.
Yeah.
Awesome.
I am here today with Kevin from Powerhouse. How are you doing, Kevin?
I'm doing great. Couldn't be better.
Dude, I went on an amazing tour today. You guys are killing it over there. I feel like each time I go, you guys have improved something. And the double stack room is looking really good. Those are really chunky buds over there.
Thank you. Yeah, that's the goal.
Yeah.
We're always improving, testing new things, and trying to get better.
Yeah, it's really impressive what you guys are doing over there. I love that you guys are also an R&D facility where you guys are constantly testing new things and highlighting the different brands that you work with.
Yeah, it's a challenge for me as a cultivator. We have a lot of different substrate sizes, and which changes irrigation strategy. But in the end, it makes me a better grower because I'm always tinkering and understanding, and then I can provide that data and everything that the supplier partners need in their recommendations. So it's great.
Right, good stuff. So tell me about yourself.
So I grew up in South Sacramento. My intro in cannabis was when I was 14 or 15, and graduated high school, did some community college local, went up to Humboldt, and,
Nice.
That's the Mecca. This was 2000. So
it was the Mecca back then.
Yeah.
That's when outdoor prices were still in line with indoor prices at times.
Yeah. Oh, it was amazing. Kind of helped me through college a little bit, and graduated Humboldt State with a degree in wildlife biology.
Wow.
And started growing when I was up there in 2002. Little under staircase setup, just very little, and then came back here and started working as a biologist and growing at the same time, and grew all the way from 2003 all the way till now, as well as being a formal biologist doing wildlife work. I was offshore doing whale surveys and traveling California doing all kinds of ecological stuff, environmental studies, endangered species work. Kind of did them both. And the outdoor experience of doing the wildlife work was amazing. So I got a little later on in my career. I spent a little more time in the office, which was great. It was rewarding. I did a lot of writing and permitting, things like that, but kind of fell out of the scientific side of it, and I always kind of latched onto the cannabis side, when I got off work, and, I always continued to grow. And so, and then 2017, I decided to say, hey, let's go into cannabis as the commercial side, and
right before rec,
and I'd been around here. I had marijuana, the original marijuana cut.
You had the marijuana cross there that smells straight like Afgoo.
Yeah,
that's so wild because I haven't smelled that sweet Afgoo smell in a long time.
Yeah, that was the goal. It was like a 50 seed pheno hunt, and marijuana grew. It was a short Afghani. It would never make it in today's market. No. It was like $2 2 feet tall.
Right.
But the terps, I always loved the terps, and I still love them. And so when I bred that and crossed it, we had a 50 seed pheno hunt, and that was my goal: is how do I make it commercially viable but still maintain the nose? And I had a couple close, and that one was the keeper.
Yeah, it stacks really well too. I feel like it's really commercially viable.
Yeah.
With the good terps, and
it gets color too. I think you saw it on day 42, and color comes in, so it kind of checks all the boxes. And it's great. It's one of my favorites. It's kind of, people ask me, what's my favorite one in there? I hold that one dear because this mom I kept from 2005 all the way up until I lost it a few years ago. Right. So this is like the next, the closest thing I have,
Nice.
So,
well, you guys got a whole bunch of genetics. You guys are constantly running different cultivars. So what's your favorite cultivar?
At Powerhouse, the Marijuana Cross is, I said I hold dear, but as far as like not my own stuff, I like lip smackers a lot. Just the complexity of terps. I kind of describe it as a three-pronged terp approach. It's like sweet, gas, and then sherb. And so, that translates to the smoke and the flavor, as well, and so that's probably my favorite in-house strain that we have right now.
Nice.
So
really cool. And then favorite flavor profile?
My favorite profile is actually tropical terps.
Nice.
So I grew a lot of tangy for a while. And so it's obviously a very citrus, but I did some work with bog sour strawberry.
Oh yeah, that's a good one.
Yeah, and
that's
so
really good.
I found an amazing male that I from that sour strawberry line, and probably 15, 16-ish, and I hit it the tangy. Actually it was actually a blue halo cross that I crossed with the tangy. Back up a little bit, and then but it had the tangy kind of nose, and then crossed it. And so I have that lineage is kind of my favorite. You get like a wide array of tropical terps. You get strawberry, you get kind of tangerine, you get like a mixed drink profile. Like you get at the bar,
somewhere between like a daiquiri and a Mai Tai.
Yeah. I don't know why, but it's just kind of like mouth watering. That terp profile. It's kind of you catch it here and there, but I feel like it's not what's around right now. So that's my favorite. It's
really cool. Yeah. And then you guys had some Wi-Fi going, dude. I was totally impressed with the Wi-Fi. It's got some unique traits in there. And the glitter bomb cross, I was pretty
the
impressed.
Bluephoria.
Yeah, the Bluephoria is good.
Yeah, that's it's nuts. It really is. It really took the kind of blueberry lineage to the extreme more than the glitter bomb did. So that's it's a winner. It's a little unstable. So I'm working on that. But otherwise, it's by far. I would say is the most vibrant terps. If you open up a bag in Powerhouse, you don't even open up a bag. You open up a tote 20 feet away, you're going to smell it. Yeah, it's the loudest thing in the house.
Right.
So I love that as well. I'm a grower first, so I kind of go towards the things that I like to grow, and so that's my focus. And Bluephoria it's a challenge to grow it. Right. Needs a lot of trellis.
So if there's one thing you could change about the current trends in flavor in the rec scene, what would that one thing be?
It would be diversity.
Yeah.
I think probably everybody would say that, we're kind of a one-dimensional commercial approach right now with the candies. So
LCG.
Yeah.
Everybody loves their LCG. Not everybody, but it's very popular. And I think with novices, it's something that flavor profile a lot of people gravitate towards.
Yeah. And I understand, it's kind of, good LCG. It kind of has a good terp profile. And
dude, when it's done right, it's amazing, dude. Yeah. You cannot talk any shit about LCG when it's done right. It's freaking special.
It is. Goes back to diversity, right. It's the spice of life.
There's so many other things out there. Absolutely.
Yeah. And, hopefully we get back there soon.
Yeah. So I got a question for you. How do you feel about flavor versus effect versus commercial viability and all these other boxes that need to be checked? How do you feel that flavor fits into all that?
As far as commercial viability, that's as of right now, we've kind of been stuck in the same place for a little while. So it's a little easier to kind of grow that similar strain and get there. But as far as I think it's going to take pushing, like tinkering with things and trying to get new approaches and those flavor profiles out there to where we can actually, have that diversity. But the candies, they don't grow bad. I think, you know how to crop steer properly. You can grow them to commercially viability. We do pretty good numbers with them. So I think, you have to, maybe alter your growing technique to be able to compete in the market. But if you're able to do that, then you can win with candies. But it would be nice if we had a bit more diversity, and comes out with challenges in growing. So you got to figure out the commercial viability. It's like the marijuana. That would not have been commercially viable, but the nose is great. So, either you got to breed it or figure out, veg it longer or whatever it takes. But, we're all trying to fit in the same box. So
it's rough.
It's rough.
Oh, it's rough. And then when we talk about commercial viability, you're looking at like 9 weeks max.
Yeah.
Typically 8 is good. 7's even better.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, but then it's if you have it where it's like 7 weeks, how do you fit that into your reoccurring schedule?
Yeah. And I found a lot of 7-weekers sometimes don't yield quite as much either. So
Most of them don't.
You're going to give up some just to get 7 weeks, and then is it worth it?
Right.
The Blue Foria we were talking about, the glitter bomb cross, that's, we harvested at 53, 54. So it's 7.5.
Yeah.
And and it actually does grow really well. So it's kind of an anomaly, but generally, my experience, it seems like those 63 dayers tend to be sometimes worth pushing. Right. But, you get a little more yield out of them.
Well, and so how do you feel about when you harvest later, you get more gas, and then when you harvest earlier, you get more candy? Do you notice that as well?
Yeah, I would say a little bit. I think obviously depends on the cultivar, but generally speaking, for sure, I would say even, the Blue Foria as an example is a much more blueberry sweet upfront when we harvested at 53. I kind of pushed it one round a little further to more closer to 60, and we lost a little bit of that. So, it's definitely true. I think, cut to cut could probably vary, but, it changes the high, trichome, the whole look of the flower when you take it too far. It's a fine line.
Well, I used to grow sour 12 weeks, right? And I think a lot of my friends did 10 and a half, 10, 11, and I always wanted to go 12 because I wanted it really strong. And now I'm seeing like the error in my ways to a degree where I'm like, oh man, if I would have just harvested a little earlier, it probably would have been more terpene. I wanted strong sour though, because it was still loud no matter what it had. It was loud, but it's probably a little louder had I harvested a little earlier.
But yeah, that narcotic high brought you in.
And it was 14% and it was so strong.
Yeah.
Stronger than the 30% these days.
Yeah, I was just talking to somebody today about DJ Short's Grape Crush.
Yeah.
I don't know if you remember that. And that I grew that 10, 15 years ago and tested at 11%.
Yeah.
And I never had anybody ever complain. It was like people's favorite thing, but it was 11. And I'm like, I look back now and I'm like, I mean, what would that even, how would that, it wouldn't even be possible in this market.
Yeah. Well, it's like, so what is it? The Blackberry Kush. I don't know if you remember that one. It was black bud, right? That stuff tested at 8%, but it also smoked like it was an 8%. Or anything. Like I could literally smoke that all day long and I wouldn't be high. Like it didn't get me high after a certain point. Like you get a little feeling from it, but it wasn't strong. And so there's some things that I agree where it's like, fuck.
Yeah.
Dude. And then other things, it's like, we just, I mean,
so
there's
entourage,
12%, you could still get really high. I think I got high in the 60s and 70s, and that was way less. It was 4 or 5%.
Yeah, that's crazy. I can't even imagine. But, it's like Blackberry. It looked like it would have tested at 25, or above. I mean, it was frosty.
It was frosty, but it was almost like, it never got you really high.
Yeah. So, yeah, it's true. It's true.
So, yeah, I'm really looking forward to having you on the panel tonight. I think it's going to be a lot of fun. I'll see you there.
Awesome.
I am here with Nelson Mandela. Just kidding. I'm here with
Willie Nelson.
I'm here with Willie Nelson, Nelson Mandela, Nelson, the man, the myth, the legend. How are you doing today?
I'm really good.
So tell me about your favorite flavor profile.
So this is going to be kind of controversial.
I love controversial, and I'm sure it's going to be good.
Well, it got played out, but
Purple Punch.
No, that doesn't really have that much of a flavor profile. Although it's a good plant to reverse. It makes
really good seeds. My friend bred some really good stuff. Seeds. Our friend, has made some really good crosses with it for sure.
Yes, and one of those crosses sold out in Illinois. That was it was a meme strain. It was Blue Dream and Purple Punch, two of the most like trash strains.
I believe that all these things are only one step away from being amazing. Like Oreos sucks, right? But it's one step away from being great.
I dropped Purple Pina Oreos.
There you go.
You know, and guess what? It ended up being a 2-to-1.
Wow.
And
that's wild.
But the effect, I don't think well, the first thing about taste, I don't think we fully understand everything that makes up the taste. And they think that we're looking at COAs as like, we should be looking at COAs as like 10% of maybe what's of value, and the other 90% is kind of unknown.
Well, we're not looking at sulfur-based compounds. We're not looking, thiols and sulfurs, esters, all these different things, right?
All these other phytonutrients that make it all up. So really right now, like how flavors should be based is going to be anecdotal until we can understand those things while the science is being developed. And so that's going to be based on, I mean, Skittles is an interesting one. Yeah. One of the best flavors ever. Now there's variations on it. None of them get me like really high, but it makes my day go really nice.
I've gotten high from dirt-grown Skittles where it's like strong and terpy. It's usually one or the other. Either it's stronger.
That's what I'm saying.
Or it's really candy.
Right.
But grown with Syngonic soil, my buddy made the best mix of Z I've ever seen.
So I've gotten high from it, but it's not the same.
But this was the where it gets you lifted. Where
really?
Like Hallie and I were on a podcast together from Humboldt Seed Company.
Yeah,
Humboldt Seed Company.
Okay, yeah.
Her and I were on a podcast together, and man, it hit. And normally I smoke that with the guests because it doesn't get people too high.
Right.
But both her and I were looking at each other like, Jesus, this is strong.
Well, let me answer your question. So I have an affinity for blueberry and mango terps because I used to get that when I was younger.
Right.
And so I still really get excited about that. But what I think I really enjoy smoking was this variation of basically the train wreck profile. All right.
There's nothing, dude, you're mentioning train wreck. This is the fourth person in the last like 5 days that has mentioned train wreck.
I've been hunting and developing things that have that profile with different variations. But one of my favorite strains, and I have old seeds of it, and I really need to pop them with Justin, but that motherfucker is too busy for everybody.
Of course.
Except you.
Yeah, of course.
Because you guys probably make a lot of money together or something.
Well, whatever. I mean,
right. I'm just saying.
He might be money motivated.
He's totally money motivated.
He's a character.
Yeah, I love Justin, but
Absolutely.
Like, come on, I got like 25-year-old seeds. I've got 40-year-old seeds. I have the Hemp Hill wall stash was gifted to me by the guy that bought his son's property and opened up the drywall, and found this bag with all these vacuum sealed jars with all these seeds from the 80s and 90s.
Nice.
I want to pop those in culture. Side note, but I got this cut from a Vietnam vet, this guy named Rick, in 2006, 2007. It was called Coconut Kush. And it was like a coconut train wreck.
Wow.
And so I've been trying to find things that are like that. Some of the older compound stuff that I think Jeff from Y East did a lot of work on, like the apricot.
Totally. The apricot line was fire.
Yeah. So I just popped, I have all these, I've been a part of a lot of projects.
If you want some, I have some too. Some of the apricot crosses for sure.
I have the flower in my car.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. We can smoke it today.
Dude, I'm down. That's great.
And so I've been really enjoying on that. There are there's like any like humble grown SFV. I really enjoy. The one thing that I'm missing that I'm not getting a lot from, I don't know if it's epigenetics or we just don't have the right cut, but the OG in LA used to have almost this limene kind of pine sol thing with the earthy gas.
The nose burn.
Yeah,
it was the nose burn.
Gone. It was like
I have it too. So that Crippy I have has it, right? But it doesn't have the pine from the OG, right? Because the OG was piney with a little citrus and the nose burn, right?
Yeah. And that went away like 2000, like I think the last time I tried that was 2015.
There's a bunch of things that they're doing differently too, like lights.
Well, that's what inspired the bridge light.
Yeah.
Because so there's two things with the lighting, right? You've got the way that the light is generated. So it's like a pulse with LEDs.
Right.
So it's by hertz, and I think it's like 10,000 hertz per minute or something like that. So you've got this high impact flashing going on, right?
It's much higher than the HPS where you get the lines when you try to photography.
I think that's a different thing, because if we look at like how, and this is something that I really kind of dove in with a guy named Greg Shelby, we would nerd out about lighting.
Yeah.
That I met through science. So I got to give him some props on this one. But he's like, the big difference is electric.
Dragon Alphas for the win.
Cool light. Well, that's what led all of the spectrum research, right? So I started doing controlled trials with that to try and see if we got closer to high pressure sodium spectrum, that 2200 Kelvin, would we see a morphology difference with the plant? And the answer was yes. So we've got a light now that is simple, that does that, and the guy that won the Billies for the gas profile is growing with that light. He's been one of our testers for the last 2 years.
Dude, that's awesome.
Yeah, Jude Green, shout out.
Well, dude,
I grow dirt.
So
respect the growers.
Respect the growers.
I've heard that song 1,000 times. You got to respect the growers.
Dude, so thank you so much for your time today. I got to get you on a podcast in the near future.
More time.
Yeah, I'll see you on the panel.
Sounds good. Cheers.
Sacktown, we're back. I cannot wait for this discussion. We just had a killer introduction, panel discussion, the science of flavors and smokability, post-processing, dry cure, all the fun stuff from a curator's perspective, all the way through to the cultivation, in-depth, detailed discussion. Thank you guys for participating in that. Now we're getting into the details of cultivation, from genetics to lighting to synganics to all sorts of fun stuff that we get to uncover and really start to dive deep into this topic around the science of smokability, which Dr. Allison Justice has released a lot of awesome findings, which we're really proud to have you join us here in Sacramento for this panel discussion, because there's a lot to talk about with the science of smokability, a ton. And that's what we're here doing. We're trying to level up together. We're trying to increase the flavor, obviously from a plant health and immunity perspective, shelf life, right? This is plant medicine, so we got to figure out how the science of flavors and smokability all ties together from a quality perspective. So enough of these salt packs and just everything that doesn't have flavor and longevity. We're tired of it. We got to find out why. And identifying some of those things comes with tools. The Aqua Lab, which we touched on a little while ago, excellent tool for tracking and measuring water activity, right? This is what they use in laboratories to gauge. And as a cultivator, we are using it to measure for genetic recipes for specifics. And we'll dive a little bit deeper into that. So without further ado, let's start off with a couple of introductions for our panelists, starting down here with James.
How's it going, everybody? My name is James Loud. I own Loud Genetics, James Loud Genetics, James Loud Podcast. I've done a breeding book. I've been in this space for about 30 years, smoking since 1991. And I'm a flavor guy. But recently, I've went from breeding for flavor to really trying to focus on effect along with flavor.
What's up? I'm Kevin Crouch, and I'm the grower at Powerhouse. I've been growing for about 20-something years, and I've been growing commercially maybe 7 or 8, and doing a large-scale LED. Now I'm operating Powerhouse and doing a lot of R&D and different substrates, LED, technology, everything. So, yeah.
Welcome, Kevin. Thank you.
My name is Heather Norris. I'm the Director of R&D and Genetics for Natura Life and Science. I have a background in plant sciences with specialization in plant breeding and genetics. Got my degree from UC Davis. And I oversee a lot of the genetic profile for Natura and also oversee the R&D trials that we do there.
Amazing. Thank you.
I'm Allison Justice with the Cannabis Research Center, and I'm just here to put data behind really good growing.
I'm Nelson Lindsley from Poetry of Plants, and I've been doing this for a long time, been in the business for a long time. I've got a brand that's in a few states now, and I've consulted and helped people set up grows, and I just developed and released a light with BIOS called The Bridge that's based off of consumer value, not efficiency, and with a hyper focus on spectrum and the plant's response to that morphology, but the morphology response from the specific spectrum.
I love it. As you guys can see, we have a very diverse panel here. We're here to challenge each other respectfully. We're here to dive into the details, from genetics to lighting to cultivation to all sorts of fun stuff, because there's a lot to go into this topic. This could be a multi-segment topic, which it will be. And I want to lead off with a little bit of, what we're going to get into first here. We'll do about 20, 30 minutes amongst each other, and then we're going to dive right into Q&A. I love engaging quicker because that honestly drives the organic nature of these panel discussions. So we're going to keep it free flowing. And again, really appreciate you guys all being here to lend your perspective. Let's start off with water activity unpacked. And I'm going to lean into Allison on this one. And to just give us a little high level overview of water activity and what we're doing here.
All right. So water activity is important, and it's important to know the difference between water activity and moisture content. They're similar, but not exactly comparative. Water activity is the unbound water, so the water that's there that microbials can continue to grow on, whereas moisture content is just the total amount of moisture that's in that plant. It could be bound or unbound.
Perfect. And this translates to shelf life. This translates to safe flower getting to the retail shelves. So there's a lot that goes into that: genetics, cultivation methodology, obviously the dry, the cure, all that stuff. So, and we've talked about the Aqualab 4TE. We're going to continue to talk about this because it's about awareness, and it comes back to being able to manage the water activity level in each of these genetics, and all of our processes are changing, right, Kevin? We're doing a ton of different research on different lighting spectrums, whether it's a checkerboard or a direct LED, different substrates and different under canopies configurations. Like, there's a lot happening, especially with the Synganic recipe. And why is water activity measurement important for us?
Yeah, of course. So what the consumer gets is the most important part of this. And so ensuring that your product isn't too dry, and the shelf life will be extended with a little bit moisture cannabis. So as far as, also terpene expression, if you can, you're going to dry your weed. Terpenes are volatile. You're going to lose those terpenes. So keeping it, a little moister than what most people would think, you can dial that in with the water activity meter, and you can have that consistency between cultivar, run, and you can count on those numbers. And it's really revolutionize what we're doing because, it's data. You can pull a nug and, it's at a 0.60 or it's at 0.70. I need to dry it a little longer, and where you're at, and you can count on that. You're not counting on a stem snap and being like, what are we at? And then you test that stem snap and you're at a 0.48, and then you're like, oh man, that's a little low. And so you can count on that data, and data is king in this.
From a cultivator's perspective, how frequently are you using the Aqualab, and how frequently are you measuring?
For us, it's daily. Every day from about probably day 6 or 7 of dry, we're taking samples from all different parts of the room and seeing what it's at, and you can see your microclimates in your room as well. So, you might have a dry spot that you never really knew, and now you know how dry it is, and you know that you need to pull that side, that corner out and bucket first. And so every day from about day 5, 6, 7 until we pull. And I used to pull more at like day 13, 14, and now we're pulling at day 10 or 11. And because of the water activity is showing that, I was pulling it too dry, and I was just going off the old kind of OG tech.
And we touched on that in the first panel too, right? Subjective processes, and now we can use science to validate it with quantitative data. So I couldn't agree more, Kevin. That was a very fascinating thing that you pointed out about the dry room pockets, right? Normally we would just rip everything down the same day, but hey, actually this part of the room was a lot wetter. We should let that go another day, maybe another day and a half.
Well, that also helps too in how you load the room, because if you know that back corner is, you either got to change your airflow or you got to load that differently. And so now you're going to load in a different snake in your dry room because that back corner or that front corner needs to be pulled first.
Data helps us make decisions, straight up. So shout out to Arroyo and the Aqualab team, because this is a phenomenal tool. It is an investment, right? 12, 14 grand, whatever this thing costs, like it is absolutely something that you invest into as a tool, specifically because every point matters. And especially at large scale operations, that 1 percentage point can matter tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars. So we're gonna get into, so we defined water activity versus moisture content briefly. And Allison touched a little bit on the range of 0.45 to 0.85 and why.
Yeah, so if you're using a water activity meter, wet right out of the grow room, you're about a 1. And so bone dry would be 0, really 0 to 0.3. So making sure you're in that scale where you're in a safe zone, and the time it takes to get to that safe zone is important. And it's a teeter-totter because, again, we were talking about all the pieces that make for a quality smoke. It's complicated, right? It's a breakdown of chlorophyll. It's a conversion of sugars. It's a hydrolysis of lipids. It's all those things that make the flavor pop and do what we want it to do. And so having that water activity meter, allowing you to get into those zones that you want to produce the result you want, is important. And, it goes further than, maybe Kevin, you're going on vacation for 2 weeks, right? And you know what you want, you know what the SNAP is, but if you have to hand it off to an employee, somebody else that's doing it, having a SOP where you can say, by day 7, I want it at this number, that's huge to ensure confidence in your crop to have consistency over time. And so that's where we're taking this quality and turning it into quantitative measurements where you can have consistency in your crop. And that's the only way you can do it with a tool.
100% agree. And especially when you start to see brand scaling all around the world. How do you hold accountability on not only just the brand side, but the brand representative, right? You have something, you have a baseline. And that's what's great about genetics too, right? We can start to hunt for certain traits, hunt for certain flavor profiles, but if the expression isn't there the way that you are handling that material, right? Like James touched a little bit about this because I know genetics plays such a huge part and overall, a larvae bud or a tighter dense bud.
Well, I think especially with pheno hunting, you're only as good as the cultivator who grew it. And if you're not able to express the plant to its fullest potential, how are you able to pick between one pheno and another phenotype? Right? I think that's one of the biggest things that's missed across the industry. And there's so many people doing pheno hunting. I don't think there's people doing pheno hunting with enough data. They're not capturing enough data over time. And that's something that needs to be improved on by most facilities, even myself. It's like there's stuff we're collecting, but there's even more stuff that we can capture.
Couldn't agree more, man. It's continuing to dive into the management and just tracking data is a daunting task for most facilities, right? Most facilities are just humming along, barely getting through the day's task, the tier 1 tasks. Can you even get to the tier 2 tasks, right? Is it mission critical to collect the data? A lot of times it's not, unfortunately. We're just at the point right now where margins are so thin, we got to operate lean, we have to operate smart. But at the same time, this is a whole journey that we're going down, especially with pheno hunting. And now that we have these tools to measure and be able to utilize this to keep the quantitative data to actually help us make those decisions much quicker than the past.
Well, and this even goes on to, having the consumer, like if you're pheno hunting and you're giving people flour and they're rolling joints or they're packing in bong rips or they're, doing whatever with it, how are you putting them on the same even playing field to be able to differentiate between the things? So, because it's one of those things that's really challenging, but we prefer joints. So if I give joints, at least everybody's getting a similar experience, right? And then if you're not curing it and drying it correctly each time and you're getting different results, what are you really doing?
Couldn't agree more. That's a perfect segue into Allison's science of smokability process and the tool that she brought. Allison, I'm going to have you touch a little bit on this because I have a slide up here that you sent me called the drying kinetics, but I'm going to come back to this one and I'm actually going to go to the next slide and touch on the science of smokability because you have such a cool thing going on and I kind of broke it all down here. Please touch a little bit on this for us.
Okay, cool. So you can actually see the smoking machine I've been referring to. And so you can see we plug a pre-roll in and we collect that smoke into a solvent. And so then we can see, all right, well, from this joint that's made this way, what's the cannabinoid delivery ultimately to the lungs is what we're collecting to understand. If it's packed a certain way, are you getting less delivery? If it's a higher water activity or lower water activity, what's the delivery difference? We can start to understand intoxicants, right? So, those smoking, we know toxicants can happen. I mean, even if you're grilling a steak, right? That charred part, there could be toxicants formed. But it's not that I'm wanting to present those toxicants and scare people, because it is the desired way of of consumption, is my desired way of consumption. But once we have that baseline, we can understand how to be safer or deliver more cannabinoids or, do whatever we want to do. But until we can have that machine collect the data that we need it to collect, we're just kind of guessing. And so in our first part of the research, we were using this machine. It's connected to a computer. The computer has to have something to run off of. So the program that's available for science out there is cigarettes, right? Tobacco cigarettes. And, as we were watching this machine smoke, it's just, chiefing it. Just not representative of what a cannabis smoker would do. And so after our first experiment, we said, all right, we kind of have to pause, because we need to program this computer right to represent what a cannabis smoker would do. And so that's what's in the back here, is a topography, a flow meter, ultimately. And so we hook a joint up, and so what I'm able to do is measure, a certain person was back there just now, and they do 2 puffs back to back. That's their way to do it, right? And there's some people that have giant one-time puffs, and then they want a long wait. Then some people are just, maybe just puffing on it. And so my goal is to average that data to where we can have something we believe and trust in to plug into the smoking machine to deliver, collect that solvent, and understand what's really being delivered to the lungs.
It's fascinating because everybody consumes a little bit differently, right? There's a lot of, connoisseur style, right? The 2 deep puffs, wait 30 seconds, let it cool down, and the science of the ash, keeping the actual cherry nice and cool and combustible, but not too hot, right? And I think we dove a little bit in that with CGO and JP earlier. So, and I'm going to come back to the drying kinetics slide. If you want to touch on this one real briefly too, Allison.
Yeah, so this is super interesting, and this is not based off of cannabis. This is from food science, because cannabis is a plant, and this is how plants react. As you lose water, if we start over here at 1, that's when the plant's wet, right? You've got the highest chance for bacterial growth, mold, microbes to grow, right? We want to get down past that and to these enzymatic hydrolysis reactions to happen. And so if you dig into the tobacco research, this is where their focus is. There's a bazillion papers out there that show, yes, in tobacco, you want those sugars, the starches to break down to sugars, because we all love smoking sugars, right? If you've had a nicotine vape, it's just sugars, and that's why we like it. If you think about tobacco, a lot of tobacco brands will even lace their cigarettes with sugars to make it taste better, to make it burn smoother, to make it burn differently. So there's all sorts of things added to cigarettes to get that desired consistent effect. But this is important specifically with water and what can happen. I like to call it the zombie stage, right? In those first, really thinking about those first 10 days of drying when it's wet, but it's drying, the plant's still alive ultimately. If you've ever had a CO2 meter in your dry room, CO2 skyrocketed. And that's because the plant's respiring. It's like, oh my God, I'm not growing anymore. I'm dying. I'm respiring. I'm eating my own cells, ultimately, is what respiration is. It's breaking down its own cells, and so it's shooting out that CO2. And so all these enzymatic process and non-enzymatic processes are happening, breaking down those sugars, breaking down the chlorophyll. And so what I'm trying to establish with my research and understand is how much of those processes that happen in tobacco are what we're also wanting to happen in cannabis. And so once we know what they are, then we can optimize, right? Because obviously a lot of people are putting out really great cannabis and it smokes well. But me getting with people who produce the best of the best to be able to put the data points behind that, that's when we have power, is when we can repeat it.
I couldn't agree more. You cannot manage without measurement, straight up. And Heather, I'd love to touch on this topic with you too, because you've gone through a ton of different genetics going through the greenhouse, right? The operation has a bunch of different things focused on plant health and immunity. Now, when you put the plant into that drying process, right, the zombie stage, talk to us a little bit about the cultivation and what you've started to see as a trend with certain genetics going through that process based on all the organic and syngenic inputs that you guys are exploring.
So we've recently adopted a syngenic approach, doing some of our R&D with you guys and kind of collaborating with Powerhouse, which has been wonderful, combining our minds, and the collective mind is better than one, right? So we've definitely seen an increase in like overall terpene expression and like the variety of terpenes that are expressed. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that there is something that she may have been involved with where there was a study on syngenic approaches and inoculants and it having a more diverse terpene profile in the end result. Is that correct? Am I correct on that?
Yeah, absolutely.
So there's a lot of science to back this up, and we've actually seen that going from, I'm not going to name any nutrient lines, but some more saltier nutrients with no syngenic approach, and having really what we call cardboard terps, right? Everybody's heard that, cardboard terps. And then that transition into the first time that you touch a plant, you inoculate it right off the bat. And this is something we talked about in a previous panel, right? We want the trichoderma and we want the bacillus to battle any type of potential pathogens, but also that silica for building your cell walls. We have a really large scale facility at Natura. So any bay that we're loading is between 8 to 10,000 plants. And it's very difficult to give 8 to 10,000 plants in 15 separate bays the attention that a home grower would give or a small scale indoor grower would give. So anytime that our team touches a plant, works with the plant, we're doing something beneficial for it. No time is wasted, hands are not idle. And that's extremely important. Like Kev said, the way that you load your dry room is very important. Having a homogeneous airflow and temperature, HVAC, humidity control, very important. Also, not breaking that capillary action of the water evaporating from the material too soon, right? There's a way to slowly bring it into equilibrium. And if you break that capillary action too soon, you're going to have, like she was saying, molds, aspergillus growth, things like that, botrytis, sporulation that you don't want in your end product. So all of that is very important.
Excellent points. And Nelson, I'd love to tap into this topic with you specifically around like consulting, right? And cultivators that may do things a little bit differently, a quicker dry, a more drier environment, whatever it might be. Touch on a little bit about your experience in that side of it and how you've helped correct some of those mistakes.
Well, I'd say like more often times than not, they'll see a good run in a room, and then I see the final product, and then I can see that something went wrong in the dry. I think a lot of the old legacy ways of drying are still being utilized, which should shift. We should be thinking about dew point. And measuring it a little bit differently. So the 60 and 60 is what most people stick with now. But what that does is it dries out the exterior of the flower faster than the inside. So you get this moisture imbalance, and then people will move to this curing phase. The reality is, at least in my opinion, is you don't need a curing phase if you dry it properly. Right? And so that's by using this technology and science, right, to measure moisture content and water activity. And a little side note, I would say that certain flowers, based on their morphology and structure, you might want to play with that end moisture content and that end result. And then if you're hand trimming, and that's the other thing too. A lot of things are sacrificed for post-processing. So if you're allowing the post-processing manager or contractor to determine what they want, well, they want it as dry as possible because it makes their job very easy. But there's technology out there where you can kind of, everyone talks, trim machines, right? Like, you're not hand trimming everything, right? Oh, we won't say that. No, yeah, you are. Okay. Are you really? Are you guys? Oh my God. All right. Well, that's the best quality. Well, in California, you can find. In California, no disrespect to any other market, but in California, you can find the highest volume of people that are qualified trimmers that can do anywhere from 2 upwards to 5 pounds a day. So then it actually makes sense. But when you go to these markets that haven't had like a culture for 50 years, you can't find people that can do half a pound a day. And if you're producing like consistently on a moderate sized indoor facility, like 250 pounds a week, and trust me, I've tried to find the hand trimmers, you sometimes have to throw in the towel. So then I started to come up with programs where maybe I was putting the product in a little bit more moist into the dry machines, and then we would hand trim it afterwards. And so and I would have to determine that based off of the morphology of the flower. So I will take personal experience and then kind of understand the needs of the cultivation or the operation and figure out what's going to work best for their needs. And sometimes that does mean a cut in quality, but they might be selling a lower value product and they might be higher volume. So although it breaks my heart, I have to separate from that. But the little things that we can do is applying, science and proper drying techniques into the drying rooms. And a lot of times the dry rooms don't have what they need. Like on the East Coast, when you're in the cold season, you need a humidifier. We in California, I've never really put a humidifier in a dry room. All right, but when you go in these areas where things are colder out and the outside air is drier, that impacts the inside environment. And what you'll see happen is things dry really quickly, really fast. So there's this counterbalance. So it's really just, you have to think about all of that. Plus, there is another thing that's really interesting that's triggering responses, a separate topic, but something to bring up because it does impact microbial load, is that we have a different microbial environment in California. You go to, when I first started growing in Pennsylvania for this one grow, I was encountering all sorts of problems that was just in the air and then proliferating on the leaf microbiome. And then people's solution for that was just to basically, make everything as sterile as possible, which makes zero sense because we're not growing cardboard, right? We're growing a living organism that works within nature and we're synthesizing it. But all that does come into play with how you think about drying and what kind of contaminants that can come into play.
And I'm glad you brought that up about other markets and total yeast and mold and total CFU counts. Like they literally don't allow you to grow synganic or any sort of organic input. They force you to grow synthetically.
Well, I when I'm in the States, the regulators hate me and love me because I will be an irritant until we can have a real conversation. And then I'll sit down with the science and I'll take the time to invest it. And I've been able to change regulations just by really engaging. And what you'll find is that the people that are put in charge of the regulations, they don't understand any of this. They're not from this world. We're speaking a different language to them. So we have to invest time to educate the regulators so that we can be allowed to grow the highest quality product.
10,000 CFU.
Or those legal markets are just going to die to black market that's coming from somewhere else that has a better quality because people are doing it right.
Well said. And that's the other thing is we have to create awareness. We have to be a singular voice, right? Because they don't understand this language that we're talking about. They don't understand that we're going through the quality quantitative metrics to make sure that we're delivering a safe product, right? They don't realize that there's a difference between a pathogen and a beneficial microbe or a beneficial bacteria. And that's where they're just looking at a total CFU count and not realizing that we're actually doing something to improve the plant health and immunity to prevent diseases and molds and all these bad things that we don't want to inhale. So let's get that rocking.
Working on it.
So, Kevin, I would love to touch back on this topic with you as well, because Nelson mentioned something earlier regarding just the genetics and also putting through in the process of like how the dry room is impacted, but also the old school tactics and what we're seeing with new school technique and approach. Also with synganics too. Like this always comes back to plant health because what we've seen in the past 10 months has really reframed the way that I think about cultivation all in all, purely just based on, plant health and immunity. And you run a much lower VPD than most, Kevin. And that is something that I truly find impactful because when we start looking at quantitative measurements with the higher water activity level or, really riding that fine line, touch a little bit about that in your perspective.
Yeah. So, ultimately, it's all about plant health and immunity. So as much as you can do to boost that up and get the proper uptake from the root zone to the top of the canopy is the goal. So I run a little lower VPD up until mid-flower than most, and I feel like it does help the calcium uptake and it helps bolster the plant to be as best as it can be up to that stage. And then, once when the bud set happens and you run the risk of, some sort of fungal pathogen getting in there due to bud size, you kind of have to scale off of that and mitigate your risk by going with a higher VPD, so that way you don't run into that. And doing that, a SIGANIC approach early on, and having the microbes help synthesize those additional additives that you're putting in there, and have that array of uptake that is going to build for that plant immunity with biostimulants, and it will help the end product and bring the full genetic expression of the plant at the end. And the only way that's really possible is to make sure that that plant is operating at 100%. Like you were touching on earlier, is you could have all these different phenos, but if you can't express that to 100%, somebody might grow it to 50% and they're going to toss that pheno. But if I can grow it at 100%, I might see something different about that that stands out, and I'm going to choose that. And it may not be for every cultivator, because they may not be able to get to that 100%. But for me, it's a standout pheno. So you can get there with an array of inputs that is not just straight salts, and maybe a balanced NPK that's getting you yield, but you need a bit more to get that 100% genetic expression that allows for that plant immunity to survive the ups and downs. We all have HVAC issues, swings in water content, whatever it may happen. But as best as you can do that, you're going to have the best expression at the end of the harvest.
James, what do you say about the genetic side of this? Because there's a lot that goes into pheno hunting, obviously, but when you start looking at different cultivation approaches, right? You're doing a lot of R&D at your facility, different nutrients, different substrates, different lighting, different airflow configurations, different light levels that you're raising. Touch on this, man. Let's get your perspective.
So many cultivars respond differently under different scenarios. Some prefer HPS, some prefer LED, some prefer CMH. Like the OGs, I've seen really good expressions of OG Kush under CMH lights. And whereas you look at something like Blue Dream, the guys want to bring back, it's like it really works well under HPS. I feel like you get a better expression. It's a bigger plant also. And so, as far as like, depending on what nutrients you're using, all these things can create a different plant expression. Environment, nutrition, right? At the end of the day, you're going to get a different expression. And so that's why it's so important to keep it even, and to be able, if you're getting results, and logging them, you're repeating those. You want repeated results at the end of the day, right? So to get those over, you got to basically log as much data as you can, and then I prefer LED for a lot of things, and I think most of our customers that are buying clones are using LEDs. But I still love the flower from an HPS, right? So. And it's in California, it's like HPS is the devil. We hear that a lot. HPS got to go away. But really, if we're talking about expression, if we're talking about flavor, I get a lot of amazing flavor and terps, especially with HPS lights.
And there's something to do with that radiant heat that we're seeing in the checkerboard room too.
Right.
I mean, it is a great thing.
Well, and even mimicking HPS spectrum with an LED, you're not going to get the HPS results. So, and I think Yair from DLI, I was talking to him earlier about his new UV lights, and it's really interesting. He's up in the terps and all these things. He's claiming, I'm going to test them out. I'm really looking forward to trying them in our facility. And we're constantly trialing stuff. So we do a lot of A/B testing where we're testing this against this, and we use a control. And so we're trying to get, what we're really trying to do at the end of the day is empower our customers to get better results, right? So we're a genetics company. We focus on genetics. I'm not trying to do everything. I'm not trying to do extraction. I'm not trying to do cultivation. I just want to empower my customers to get the best results possible.
Well said. We can all appreciate that. And touching on spectrum, Nelson, let's talk about the bridge, because this is tying right in what James just touched on with the HPS spectrum, and a little bit more about this.
Yeah, sure. So actually, there's someone here that we were playing around with this, and we were coming to the same conclusion. I won't name him, but I won't blow him up. But we were playing, we got a spectrum tunable light about 5 or 6 years ago because LED companies were always sending me lights. And a lot of the early spectrum tunable lights, that you had to like 3 different drivers and they were 1500 watts. And it was like, this is nonsense. So there was a company that developed a technology that was interesting. It didn't have like the exact bandwidth I was looking for entirely, but it got close enough. So I spent a lot of time just playing around with timing intervals with the bringing the warmer spectrum in and the cooler spectrum. And then I just thought that the light was too complicated because when I would go to try and pitch this light at facilities I was working at, everyone was like, this is too many bells and whistles, right? So then I did around 2.5 years of controlled trials in a room, as controlled as I could in like a barn, right? But I had 3 different rows and they all had, it was like 6 different cultivars in 3 sections by batch. And one was, kind of around that 45 to 5,000 Kelvin range. And then one was closer to 6,500. And then one was 2,700 Kelvin. And played with the red to kind of get it as close as I could to the HBS spectrum. And I noticed there was a 5% differential in weight, sometimes higher or lower. So there was no yield difference by the spectrum. But specific cultivars, the way that the bracts formed, I don't have the technology like these 2 geniuses next to me to measure all this except my eyes. But the bract formation, the way the flowers developed and the way the flowers would stack was closer to high pressure sodium. And then when I would sit with the brokers and I would offer them, because for me, cool, sweet, but it doesn't matter unless it sells, right? Like what really matters is money, right? Like, is it going to add value to the consumer? So when I would offer samples, they would always go for the pound or the pounds that were grown under the warmer light. And so there is something there that's maybe nostalgic, or there were some subtleties there that I have not measured. But for me, that was enough for me to invest time in developing this. Plus, there were certain cultivars that performed better that did not perform better under the full spectrum LEDs. And full spectrum LEDs then moved towards efficiency being the value curve. So we see a lot more red being put in the lights. And red is the most bioavailable, which means that the plant doesn't need as much of it to get what it needs. But then people were putting more red in because red is also the most efficient. So they're able to jack up their micromoles per joules, and they would offer that as the value offering to buyers. Hey, we're generating more light per watt, right? But that doesn't translate into consumer value. So then people struggle bust along with that, bleaching a lot of tops, and maybe seeing a depreciation in quality. And while that trend was going, I was trying to focus on why so many people were going back to high pressure sodium or the checkerboard with HPS or CMH, and also why specific genetics, because I went on like a spending frenzy trying to get old cuts. And then I was growing them under the LED lighting, and I'm like, why does my OG smell like earth now? Like what happened? So can we recapture some of that we lost? And there's a lot of things that have changed from 2002, 2007 time range when I started growing to where we're at right now. Like we were never able to push more than like 600 ppfd on to a plant with a vented hood, right, or a parabolic. So it became a little bit of a rethinking the philosophy of cultivation, and then spectrum being a part of that. And part of the philosophy that I take is that it's a zero-sum game. That if you're going to push for a lot of yield, and there's certain things that you can do with lighting that's going to drive a lot of yield, and that's your focus, and that's the value you're going for, then we can do that. But you're going to dilute other value points. And what's happened now is the market's gotten more competitive as there are like 3,000 light grows everywhere, mega farms everywhere at this point. It's become about efficiency. It hasn't necessarily become about consumer value. And what that's also done is kind of bottlenecked our genetic selection. And we've lost a ton of diversity. And that diversity doesn't mean genetics. It means experience and effect. And so all of this is one giant puzzle piece that I'm stoked to be a part of, because there are things that we've lost that were valued in cannabis from 20 years ago that improved my life and improved the people's lives around me. I mean, I wrote records on specific strains. We had moments. Like there used to be cannabis strains that would have an effect that were more psychoactive and maybe less sedative or narcotic. And I feel like things have moved more towards this narcotic trend. And I think that that's connected all the way down to the value curve that's been set by scaled cannabis and lean farming, all the way down to the brokers and then to the cultivation practices that mirror that. So the idea with the bridge is we want to bring back some of the things that we've lost and apply some of the new technology around that. And maybe we'll find a middle point where we can recapture just enough to recreate some of those experiences and still be, economically viable and competitive on the market when it comes to yield.
That's fascinating. Thank you for that. I mean, this is exciting. We're looking forward to running them at Powerhouse and really, diving deep into those, man.
Yeah, I actually R&D'd that light, and it's nice.
Appreciate you, bro.
Yeah, and it's exactly what you said. Stacked nodes better. Yield was not any less or more. I would say it was, relatively the same, but the nodal stack and the bract is exactly what I found as well.
So one of the strategies I had, thank you. One of the strategies I had with that is instead of like pitching the big growers on this, it was really hard to convince people that this was a good idea. All right, because it was moving against the curve of the lighting industry where everyone was chasing efficiency. But for me, so we got it to, I think that was at your home grow, right? And I'm like, can we please get this light made? I don't care what box it's in.
Yeah, we want them.
Yeah. And I'm going to get it to guys that I'm meeting that are producing really high quality home grow. And I would just have been, the last 2 years I've just been traveling, going to events, just trying to meet cool people that still have the passion, or have the fire. Like everyone here we need that. Like the last 2-3 years in California have been rough. There's been a lot of burnout. I didn't want that to consume my path. I still get into a grow room and act like a fucking 5-year-old. And when all this other noise comes into play, it kind of ruins the joy. Fuck that shit. That's how I felt about it. So I'm going to go to places where it's a little fresh, and I'm going to go around. I'm going to meet people that are still excited. Kevin be one of those. And then we've got a few other guys that I met, and we got them these test lights. Hey, will you try this? And their results were really stellar. There was a guy that just won the Billies for the gas profile. That's been one of the testers of the light. So we're seeing and I'm driving everything based off of anecdotal evidence, and I'll circle back around and we'll do some more work. But there's so many variables that for me, it's like, all I care about is do the consumers value it? And then we'll chase why later. Because I don't have the time, nor am I intelligent enough to do that work or patient enough. But what I can do is observe and then try and find solutions. And it's been cool to see, and it's been welcomed. And, we did like a soft launch at MJ, and people were like, the BIOS gave me a shot. And then the response was really positive. So we're ramping it up, and we're really hoping that we can follow that up and start having conversations about genetics and maybe guide people. Like these genetics we're capturing some notes that we lost in the Blue Dream or the OG. And this is what we're doing to get there. And we just go back to how it was when I learned how to grow, which was, quiet, undercover, but open source. Like everything was really collaborative. When I have a guy that I'm working with in New Jersey right now, we're building a grow right now, but he was like, we've been talking shop for 25 fucking years, and there's a spirit of that that's really special. So some of that is just like, also, let's bring a little bit more of that spirit back into this. And we can see the big monolithic business that's being created, but that doesn't mean you don't still create a rad song. You know what I mean? Like there's bad pop music everywhere, and there's still people making good fucking music. We can do the same thing with weed.
Couldn't agree more, man. And you touched on competition. Sacramento being one of the most competitive markets in the world. District 6 here in Sacramento has over 2.5 million square feet of canopy. So when you touch on the consumer experience, we touch on something that always happens to come up, which is frustrating, but white ash. I would love to get your guys' hot take on white ash. And does it lead to quality? Is this a quality factor? And how does it tie into water activity?
I think the short answer is yes, it is a quality factor, but it's not the full determining quality factor. I think that speckled ash, I think black ash is bad. We can all agree that black ash is bad, but in my opinion, white ash can be a quality. I mean, you could put calcium in your flush and you're going to get white ash, right? But I think as far as, for the most part, yeah, but with living soil, a lot of guys, Floraflame, shout out Chris, but his stuff didn't have maybe the whitest ash, but man, the smoke was freaking amazing. And so I don't think it's an end all quality, one of those, but I do think that white ash is important.
I couldn't agree more. It's not an end all be all, but black ash is likely, bad, and it's a little bit of a speckled black, still probably going to burn really good. But it's not an end all be all. There's more to the flower and the roll and everything else that goes in there.
There's so much to do with how you roll it, how you grind it. Like the thing is what I took this deep dive into joints because I see the market going into two directions. We're going into pre-rolls and hand rolls, and we're going into carts, right? Because people want convenience, right? So I took this real deep dive into learning. I mean, I've always known how to roll joints, but I really wanted to roll perfect joints. I see guys like Marco and Bruno, and I'm like, okay, how can I create that product to put on the shelves? So we took this deep dive, and I realized it has a lot to do with the grind, right? It has to do with how you pack it. It's how tightly it's rolled and how you light it. And I think there's all these things. And on Instagram, you're seeing guys take a torch to it to make it even more white. And so we have, there's these false qualifiers that aren't necessarily indications of quality, but I would say that, a lot of times it is a sign of quality, that it was flushed properly or flushed with the right things.
You make a salt and pepper white with the roll.
Yeah.
What about you, Heather?
I completely agree. I can't remember any time that I've smoked something with dark ash and thought, wow, that's really smooth. Most of the time that I'm consuming and I'm like, man, this is fresh, this is clean, this is tasty, this is smooth, it has white ash. So I definitely see that correlation. And a lot of my indoor deep water culture that I grow, very clean medicine. Ask Sergio, always got that white ash. So, yeah.
Well, water content. You could have higher water content and it's not going to have white ash.
So in my experience, the only thing I can put a stamp of certainty on is that in our first phase of the science of smokability study, where it was just simply like everything else was held static except water activity, the wetter, the whiter. But there's lots of other things that can be a cause of white ash. I mean, there's things that are put into cigarettes to cause ash to be whiter. So there's things that can be manipulated that I don't think any of us would agree that would be good or increase quality. But I think there's been enough people to say and have that correlation between white ash and good quality that there's something there to it. I think water is just a tiny piece of that puzzle because the difference we saw between the 0.45 and the 0.85 wasn't huge. It wasn't, like one was black and one was very white. It was a minor grayscale. There was a statistical difference there, but it was minor. So there's a lot of other things that are to it, though. The elemental content. There's more to explore.
I'm glad you brought up the ash color specifically around water content, because when we start looking at the different factors of smokability and harshness, how do we measure harshness knowing that you didn't see a huge variance between 0.45 and 0.65 or whatever it might have been? How do we get there? How do we measure that? Is it calorie counting? Is it something different?
How do we measure the whiteness?
The harshness.
Harshness. So that's simply qualitative, right? So in the first phase study, we had the qualitative measurements, right? I can have a colorimetric wheel where I'm looking at the grayness, right? But then harshness, there's no computer that can measure that. And so you have to know what you're looking for. It has to be a person. So we had a qualitative part of our study where we sent out 100 pre-rolls and had a survey. And so that was our, statistical backing for harshness just around water activity.
Fascinating. So you got a bunch of samples, and yes, I agree. I have a very sensitive palate, right? If it's not smooth or on the smoother side, it's just hard to consume. It's very painful. And I think that's one of the things that I started to catch on to, especially certain genetics, right? They're just smoother. Like, the RS11, the Zope. This is why I'm so hyped on the Blue 40 too. The Skittles, come on now.
The candy is definitely, a lot of the candy in the modern genetics is a lot smoother.
Can I add one? So this is the one thing I would be cool to measure, right?
And I just my comment on it. When something is burning white, a lot of times it's just a little bit more enjoyable of a pull. There's an experience there where it just was probably a properly made joint or whatever. But one of the things that's interesting is that the higher that we burn cannabis, the more carcinogens are released. Can you agree with that?
Yes.
Okay. And there's like hundreds, right? Yeah. So what would be interesting to see is if we looked at like those white ash joints, right? And what temperature it gets for them to be white, and the difference in how much carcinogens are released, because I would say maybe one of the things that people are enjoying is actually poisoning themselves.
Yes.
But I also think when you burn at a lower temperature, you're getting more terps and more flavor.
I'm not disagreeing with that. That's the comment is that there's an experience that people are getting from the white ash
100%.
that's creating an effect that's coupled with poisoning yourself.
Right.
Because we enjoy poisoning ourselves.
Right. Well, is it a false narrative just like purple weed is better than green weed, though?
No, I think it's just something worth looking into. Right. Because then there could be maybe an argument, because if you're using it for medicine, the preferable way should be eating it all the time.
I agree 100%.
Yeah, but people still get joy out of the ritual of smoking. That's been a part of human civilization for a long time. So perhaps maybe there is a lower risk way of smoking or heating and not burning, right? Because if we're below 210 degrees, we're not going to release very many of those chemicals. Like
I'm still
maybe not any at all.
convinced that it's protecting my lungs from lung cancer. So,
well, there's a placebo effect that's probably more powerful than most medicine we take.
I agree.
Yeah.
I
So
agree,
keep believing
100%.
that. I'm sorry
yes.
if I took a dookie on your parade.
I think one thing we can be sure of is quit smoking like you're in college and you're trying to like salvage every piece of joint. Don't reuse your roach.
Don't smoke the carbon garden.
all of the flower between where it's burning and your mouth, every time you take a pull, it's collecting that, right? It's acting as a filter. And then that's why it tastes gross too towards the end. So
is BHO safer than all other forms of extracts and flour because it doesn't have the lipids and you can still burn it at a low temp? Controversial take.
are you burning the BHO or are you?
Well, you're kind of vaping it,
Are you
right?
combusting it?
Well,
Combustion's where the most of the in the traditional tobacco sense, combustion's where most of the toxic.
But you're vaporizing hash, right?
Yeah.
Like you're heating. You're not combusting it, right? You're vaporizing it.
So
but
theoretically, that should be healthier.
Right, but because the issues with solventless is the lipids. You don't want to be smoking lipids, not long term.
Yeah.
Right? So maybe BHO will have a comeback.
Maybe.
Let's open up for some Q&A. Let's get the audience engaged, guys. What questions do we have? I know we've covered quite a bit. So the question was the difference of fiber in cannabis, right? So what are the different qualitative factors of fiber and how does that impact smoke?
Some cultivars are more dense than others, and I would say that some of the dense ones actually, even we're talking about white ash, they burn with more white ash, and the actually if you're not ashing it, they'll hold on to the joint longer and they'll burn down and actually keeps it cooler. So I think there's benefit to stuff that's more dense for those things as opposed to something like Skittles that's more light and airy. You know, that's the good example of some, and some of the that have the more open bract. That where they stack and they foxtail, those definitely don't burn as white of ash. But I think there's also, benefits to the terpenes in both. So and flavor expression.
Good question. Thank you. What other questions do we have? I have a question. Let's talk spectrum, right? I would love to go back to this because this is something that I believe that when the plant has more food, right, more beneficials, you can give it more light. And how does spectrum actually come into play here, specifically with more red or more blue? Nelson, I would love to tap into you first on this, please.
All right, so the question is, when you're combining when you're using microbials, photosynthesis is more efficient or effective and you're able to provide more light to the plant. I don't know. I maybe I've encountered that, but I've never correlated it. because I've always, for the most part, always included microbials into my regimen. You know this. We talked about regenerative farming, a long time ago. But there was always something there I couldn't that was adding value. So it's always been a part of my program. But I do go to grows where they're just sterile Grodan, Rockwool grows with salts. And I see them pushing higher light. But whether the stress I observe it's hard to determine whether I don't know how to answer that without actually performing a trial. That would be the case. So if you guys are observing that, I think that's interesting. But I've seen guys that have grown pretty stellar rooms at high light. And then let's define high light. What is high light? Is that 1500 ppfd? Because that's I think I've gone as high as 1800, 1900 with high density lighting. And I grew flower. I had my craziest yields ever. But no one wanted to really buy the weed. So, it was way below the typical price I was getting. So I stopped kind of doing that very quickly and then went back to maybe peaking out around 1200 ppfd. So if you guys have discovered something where adding microbial fertilizers, which I do believe microbial fertilizers in conjunction with ionic salts provide a lot of value. And I just wouldn't be able to comment on, yeah, maybe, sure. Yeah, I guess that's what I'd say.
Kev, what's your take on this? Because I know we've kind of gone back and forth and really started to dive deeper down this of being able to increase yield with quality, being able to push that plant with more organic inputs. Talk a little bit more about that.
Yeah. So I kind of have a thought, you add a lot of people add more organic inputs, specifically fulvic acids, things like that help synthesize nutrients and make them more available so you can run a lower EC. And I think that's the right approach generally for most people. For myself, I tend to push the plant a little harder. So I'm going to run a little higher PPFD, and I'm going to try to just get maximize the genetic potential and push the plant as hard as possible with that. And so far it seems to be the right approach for myself, but with that comes high risk, high reward, because sometimes you run into problems when you start yielding higher and you end up stepping outside your bounds.
Right.
So it's not for everybody.
Whether it's botrytis or herming the plant. Go ahead, Heather.
There's a lot of plants that can reach their light saturation point a lot sooner than cannabis. There's a lot of studies that have been published that cannabis can take up to 2,000 micromoles, right? And that's quite a lot of light. But there's really no adverse effects. If anything, it kind of leads to a linear increase in your yield. But you have to have everything dialed in, right? So the amount of light and photons that the plant is receiving and using is almost like the driver for your car. So the faster you drive, the harder you can crash, right? If you don't have everything dialed in, then you're gonna crash and burn pretty quickly. There's a lot of trials that I'm involved in, a lot of using spectrometers and checking different spectral outputs of the lights that we're trialing. Plug, I would love to try one of your lights for my trial. Awesome. Yep. And what we've noticed is more of a high blue kind of tends to lead to shorter, bushier plants, right? You want to signal more of that red and far red near the end. And that's kind of signaling the plant to senesce almost as if you're going through autumn, right? You're going through October. If anybody pays attention to the sun, when it's autumn and it's October and it's harvest season, it has more of this red tint to it, right? That's actually a little bit more phytochrome, right? So we're increasing our red to far red to signal to the plant naturally as it does in the environment, hey, it's time for you to mature and ripen and end your life. So very cool. I'm actually running a trial at my house with a new Mammoth Mint White. I don't know if I could plug them or not, but it's more green in there, right? And so checking out the spectral outputs with the spectrometer, contributing it phenotypically and seeing how the plant grows and responds to these lights. There's something to be said for how plants utilize the green spectrum and how it actually does help in photosynthesis. And I do believe that they've kind of cracked the code on that a little bit. So It's pretty cool to have a spectrometer if anybody's interested in what your lights are doing, and check out, what your CRI is. How close is your color rendering index to matching the natural sunlight, right? You want to check like your CCT values, your blue, your green, your red to your far red, your UV. All of that is important and plays an end role in the performance of your plants. So
I would just say the interesting thing though is because we're growing under like street lamps, right, which we're not really mirroring the sun altogether accurately. We got unexpected results and expressions from the plant that then became valuable. So I agree 100% on the green factor. And we worked on that with the spectrum to make sure there was as much as we could get with the limitations and everything. But it is interesting to look at how the plant it will express itself when we're kind of breaking nature in a way. And sometimes that can lead to undesirable results, or sometimes that can lead to a whole movement, which is what a lot of the early cannabis cultivars that weren't sun grown, and it's interesting too, just even different locations. And like the best OGs always come out of Humboldt, in my opinion. Just gonna say that, but
So I have a theory about that, and it's just a theory. But old school genetics that we all know and we love from way back in the day, those were cultivated, they were sourced, they were found and bred under natural sun and outdoor environments. So somewhere in its genetic profile from way back in the day, it's conditioned in its genotype to perform optimally under full spectrum natural sunlight. A lot of the more recent breeders that we're used to, they're breeding indoors under LEDs. So epigenetics is playing a huge effect. Anybody that doesn't know what epigenetics is, it's basically saying that your phenotype is equal to your genotype plus your environmental impact. And it's not 50-50. Your environment can impact more of your phenotype than your genotype will. So what is really cool about these old school strains is if you have an adjustable spectrum light, you can kind of bring in that old school full spectrum HPS that a lot of these old school genetics were bred and selected under
100%.
and bring out more of its genetic potential. But these new finicky ones that were bred under LEDs, I bring them to my facility, they get mixed light, they get a lot of sunlight, and they get pissed about it. So there's something to be said for epigenetics and your genetic potential,
100%.
just in my opinion.
Yeah.
There's a lot of seed makers out there, right, James?
There's a lot of seed producers out there. That's for sure.
So that's such a fascinating point. I mean, when it starts to come back to smokability, so all these different things with spectrum and allowing the plant to fully mature, right? You trigger that autumn, that putting it into senescence response. So yes, that's why it's fascinating about spectrum tuning and what we're doing, even on the under canopy side. So shout out to Fabian. We're going to be doing a whole chroma launch in July and talking more about, spectrum tuning and far red and really like diving deep with Tim and team. So that's going to be super fun. But again, I think that there's a lot that goes into the full maturation of the plant through the spectrum tuning process to get a little bit more of an enjoyable experience. So what other questions do we have from the audience?
Justin from Sacramento. One thing I haven't seen or heard discussed here tonight is the influence of flavor in science is pest pressure or stressors like that I haven't seen or heard anybody discuss yet. What is your guys' experience with pest pressures and how that affects the flavor overall with cannabis?
I mean, I've seen some of the best crops come out from my friend's thrip crop where he had issues with thrips. It wasn't full infestations, but where he has thrips in the room, and then terpene expressions are turned up, and I think there's something to be said for pest pressure and, but I'm in a clean facility, so we try to have zero pest pressure.
I've grown in a lot of, areas that where the pest pressure just kind of in and out. Yeah. And I would say that for sure, there's been a positive impact on some of the, as long as it's not, a massive issue, but like light spider mites, sometimes light thrips, things like that can impact it. So then what I started to do, and there was a few people that were like, you can simulate this. So I started taking a hole puncher to my leaves and I would get similar effects. I mean, it's time consuming, but I like hanging out in a grow room anyway. So I'd go around with a hole puncher and start simulating eating the leaves.
I'd love to see photos of that.
Yeah, no, I had good batches.
Cheddar cheese leaves.
I don't know if I'm just a lunatic. No. Well, it's a little harder, but it would have and there was things that back in the day I would learn from the old timers, which is interesting. Like one of the things was sticking a copper nail into the trunk of a tree, things like that, which is copper toxicity, right? You're kind of introducing heavy metals, but simulating those kind of stressful events where then the plant's oh, we're really screwed, we're coming back, right? And then all of that, because a lot of those phytonutrients and those aromatics that we're chasing are defense mechanisms, right?
Absolutely. And James, that's funny you brought that up because I do know a few farms that actually have thripped steering strategies to just maintain a certain
I don't
level
want
of
any
thrips.
of these thrips ever again,
Me
though.
neither. And there's lots of different types of thrips, right?
Yeah, well,
But
no, the
still-
Western flower thrip that's evolved in Central Valley, I hope it disappears forever.
Totally.
Yeah.
I think obviously, you have bugs in the grow. It's a bigger problem than that, but it's kind of come back to a little bit of crop steering. You can induce stress in other ways.
Sure.
And there's also SAR responses that you can probably induce.
But those have different effects.
Yeah, very true. Yep. I mean, my experience is all qualitative, but you induce stress at the right times, you're going to get, an output that, is one way or the other, depending on genetic, so, it'd be interesting to see that, what's hole punching do versus drought stress versus
I know, and
SAR response.
we happen to be sitting next to two scientists, so.
It's pretty cool to dig through the literature and basil, for example, is an aromatic plant, and they've done all sorts of stress treatments to basil. Time of day, the basil plant will put out different volatiles, morning versus evening, or different lighting techniques or photo periods. Every little thing can adjust what that plant does. And, you always got to kind of think back to, all right, let's get out of today and where our head's at. These trichomes weren't necessarily made for us to smoke. We do.
They are now.
Yeah, I mean, they are now, but, if you're thinking evolutionary, what were these plants made for? These are just defense mechanisms for the plant to survive and reproduce. That's it. They're protecting from UV, they're protecting from pest and disease pressure. And so every little move you make to that plant is going to change that output. So, that's how I try to think about it.
Yes, sir. Question up front. So the question was, is there a specific type of light or a spectrum to help reduce pest pressure?
There is, but I don't know if I would recommend it because it reduces our lifespan too. So, UVC, there are people that are using UVC. The other thing too is UVC is destructive to the plant tissue.
We use UVC for IPM. So, we don't use it regularly, but Grandmaster LED has UVC lights. And
Right.
we actually use the UVC. I didn't know how to use it properly. We were running it a little too high.
Oh.
Right when we saw some pests, and we completely annihilated the pests. And the plants got a little burned, but
Right,
we run
that's
them at
the
night
point.
when nobody's in the room, and I think they work really well from what I've seen.
I think if you're willing to take the risk of, the plant damage,
Right.
and you're in a situation, I think it is a good solution. The issue is that you just said when you started it out, you were figuring out how to use it, right?
Totally.
So I would never put that in a facility where I had employees that were not super efficient.
Oh, we only run it at night when nobody's in the facility. Literally
Right.
nobody's ever in the facility because it's dangerous. You can cause cancer and all kinds of
Right,
other
right.
things.
So I think about things as far as worker safety, and then I'll take a different strategy. But if it's in my facility and I'm in control of it, I wouldn't have an issue with that if there was a big issue.
I'm
That'd be-
anti-spray, so if I can never spray my plants again,
I know I like spraying with biologicals and
Sure.
preventatives and things like that. And
Yeah.
I don't like spraying, but I get good responses with that,
Mm-hmm.
But and then also just with your doing the big EC pushes and the heavy stacking, you should be spraying a calcium as the buds are coming on. So there's a lot of things you can do to really steer the plant with foliars. But yes, to your answer, there is a light spectrum that you can use, but be very careful. And, we don't offer that because we're worried about the risk.
What other questions? Yes, sir. Great question. So does substrate influence smokability?
I would say that it has so much more to do with the cultivator in these days than it does with the substrate. I think you can get great results. I've seen great results with rockwool. I've seen great results with cocoa. We were talking earlier, Heather, about DWC and soil and living soil. I think, a lot of people put this emphasis on the substrate when they should be putting an emphasis on the cultivator to getting the plant to express to its full potential.
Well, that's because it's a religion. I was just saying that's because there's a community that's been built around it, and they're practicing something indoors that we should be practicing outside.
100%.
Like at scale. And so to project that message, they've created a religion around it, which in a way kind of renders it ineffective at making the meta change that really needs to happen as far as we approach farming, because then it'll turn people off because it kind of gets a little cult-like. So we hear a lot about substrate because it's connected to people's identity and purpose and self. But we should be looking at substrate outdoors in a different way and how we're replenishing carbon and the real cycle. But indoors, we're kind of minorly part of the problem, but part of that is just being a part of a system that's pretty flawed. And we're just trying to figure it out.
I think rockwool sometimes gets a bad name because it's probably the hardest substrate to work with. And so there's a lot of guys that are growing a mediocre flower and they have a mediocre end product because they're not good cultivators, right? And so it has so much more to do with the cultivator and the environment than it does to do with the substrate. I think any substrate you can get really good results if you know how to optimize it.
100%. So when you're looking at it that way, but when you look at like operationally, rockwool is probably the easiest thing to use.
Right. At scale, it's a lot easier.
It's completely unsustainable.
Right.
It's also a race car too.
What's that?
You can get high yields, but you can also crash and burn just as fast.
Right.
So you have to know what you're doing to properly manage. Like you said, the cultivator really matters in that sense.
But I would say that like it is batch to batch, and I've had like, it's funny, like if I tell people like how I grew the weed, then they start judging it based off of that.
Right.
But there is, for a long time, I was growing with a controlled release fertilizer and peat moss and worm castings and a little bit of kelp and humic here and there. And it was being sold as regenerative living soil cannabis.
Wow.
And that is not what it was, but that's what people thought it was because of the way that it smoked. And so then they started marketing in that way, which got me thinking this is all just marketing that's connected to an ideology. And that's kind of problematic. I know I'm digressing, but.
Well, we can dive into sustainability too with like peat. I don't know how sustainable peat is and these other things long-term, Alaskan hummus, stuff like that. It's like.
We'll probably end up planting things back into the ground at some point.
Right.
And to piggyback on that, I mean, you can inoculate rockwool with, biologicals, and we're actually running some trials coming up with measuring CFU counts within the substrate. Thank you, MyFlora. That's going to be helping us with building that assay to actually track and measure this, because we do a once a week inoculation in the root zone. And Kev, I know we've modified the recipe. We've kind of tweaked it here and there, but measuring CFU counts in the runoff and in the substrate, the comparison, right? And Jeremy, with Kyrospace, we're measuring dissolved oxygen and really using that as, the oil to push all these things through the engine. That is fascinating because I know, we are getting a lot of great expression, and, we have a veg block that's rockwool that we stack on cocoa. We have a cocoa veg block now going on cocoa, but rockwool, same effect. We just got to measure those CFUs.
Is there a salinity level where you see the CFU count drop? Like if you're pushing stacking EC and all that?
I mean, traditionally, I think the microbes that are, we're inserting into the media can handle high salinity, but as far as a quantitative number, we haven't seen that yet, but that's exactly the kind of thing we're going to be finding out here shortly. And see exactly how hard can you push it, in rockwool versus cocoa, and what microbes actually live at those higher EC levels versus not.
Are you running the high EC levels at the lower VPD, or do you?
Yeah,
okay.
That's right at the line when I start to transition. But yes,
okay. There's a curve there.
Yep, there's a curve there.
And then at the lower VPD, are you running a higher PPFD?
Same curve, the same exactly what we were talking about. It's it all kind of goes together. You kind of meet in the middle, and right when they meet in the middle is where
So you might be able to like kind of front load that plant microbially as it's moving in, and maybe the microbes are more important for the first half of the life, and then.
Well, yeah, exactly. Certain microbes, might be a little bit more important. Your trichodermas and things in the very, front load with that for fusarium protection, and then, we got to figure out the salinity that they, what's their top end, what's their optimal DO, in those sort of scenarios to allow for, the proper inoculation at the right time, and it'd be wild, but you're almost microbe steering at that point,
Are you in slabs or just blocks?
Right now we're in mainly cocoa, but
you are in cocoa.
I'm in cocoa now, but so that's the whole goal is we're gonna be doing a side by side with rock wool versus cocoa and see a comparative analysis between the two and how that the microbe quantitatively compared species wise
I'm gonna bet that the slabs will do better as far as CFU count.
Yeah, I mean a little more aqueous. Generally.
Less surface area for evaporation too.
Yeah. Yep.
And that's one of the reasons why we started with the DO, right? We wanted to understand if our DO was too high to keep the microbial life colonized and more formed. So
yeah, it's very oxidative too. Yeah. So
what's your target DO level? Is it above 15?
Well, we had we found at current status we found 12 DO to be the
rainwater.
To be optimal for CFU diversity, not necessarily CFU total count, but CFU diversity.
Cool.
So
that's valuable info.
Big time. That 12 pushing a little bit towards 14 range is like where we had the most microbial diversity, right? And the colonization was awesome. And again, Jeremy has these pictures on kairospace.com. We ran this trial with him and he showed us the crystallography imagery of 8 ppm, 12 ppm, 18 ppm, and you can see clear as day.
How are you getting the ORP level higher? Are you using oxidizer or using ozone?
Nanobubbles.
Nanobubbles.
Through Kairospace, yeah.
Will the nanobubbles go above 12?
Yeah, but they're up to, I don't know we're 24 is what our initial.
No kidding.
Yeah.
Oh wow. Yeah. Okay. So you're able to dial it back.
Yeah, it's completely adjustable.
All right, I'm gonna take that intel and run with it. Thanks,
for sure. And we've got, Jeremy's also innovated a new solution for direct line dissolved oxygen injectors as opposed to just batch tank injection there. So
yeah, we're messing around with him right now in the veg, and he has like a sparger unit that you can plug it into small batch tanks, and they're completely infusing nanobubbles per tank.
Sweet.
Yeah, it's pretty awesome.
So yes, Tyler, great question, because that is exactly why we're going down this rabbit hole of measurements of CFU counts, because there is personally, I think that there's a response that the plant has that we can actually lead to a better flavor, a better experience overall in that final product.
I'll add one more thing. Back in the day, there was a redwood bark substrate called cocoa knot. It, of course, wasn't sustainable, but I always think about whether I could get some of this. It was like ground up redwood bark. It did have a noticeable impact on the quality of the flower in a really interesting way. And I don't know if just bacteria colonize differently on it or whatever. But just a side note, I think there is something there, but I think that there's you remember it. Yeah. I was growing fire Bubba and Master Kush out of that. And then I run a cocoa and it would be the same, whatever. But
helped with microbial colonies.
Yeah, must have been. So I think there is something to it. But I think that there's so many variables, it's hard to figure that out and measure it. But for me, I like carbon-based media. I feel like I grow better flower in carbon-based media, and that just might be because of my cultivation style.
So anecdotally, I don't grow in a media. My media is water that I grow in. And how does that affect the smokability when there's really no media? It's a soilless media, right? I can't add any organics in there because it'll rot my roots out and I'll have snotty brown roots by week 5. You have to be very careful about what you add when you're doing deep water culture. But I don't think that there really is a definitive this media leads to better smokability, because growing in pure water and just having oxygen in my root zone and the right level of nutrients and the right temperature, and the trick to getting those terpenes to really express themselves in a sterile media such as water is adding a type of sucrose at the end, right? So There's products that are out there. You can probably just Google it and find like 20 million products that are sucrose. But the plant essentially takes the light and it converts it into glucose to make energy for the plant. But then when you're providing sucrose to the plant, you're almost tricking it into thinking that it has more sugar availability so that it's taking that energy and putting it everywhere else and then saying, I have enough energy from photosynthesis to do all of my processes that I need, but here's this extra sugar that just came in, and now I'm gonna take it from the source of the roots to the sink of the flowers, and it's gonna actually increase your terpene profile. So that's actually pro tip, what I've seen, sucrose.
I'll add one thing to that. That's cool. I grew deep water culture and abandoned it because I couldn't, with that problem, what you be careful what you add. But you can grow a really clean flower. I would say part of it is subjective, but there's a soil biologist that I know named George Salou, and he did some research. They were trying to figure out how to write the regulations in Sonoma County for outdoor cannabis. And they were planting hemp plants near vineyards to understand the impact that the hemp plants near the vineyard would have on the grapes. And there was a transference in terpenes and phytonutrients from the hemp plants that affected the quality of the grapes. So there is, and they don't fully understand why, right? So what we do understand is that there is an economy in the soil and there's biodiversity. So I think that there is an impact. And this was like, I remember back in the day, some guys like, just grow a blueberry plant next to your weed plant and it'll taste like blueberries. And I'm like, bro, you are fucking high. All right. And now I'm like, oh my God, he was right. You know? So there's something there to that. But when we're talking about container plants, I think there's probably minor differences and it's probably subjective. But it would be really cool to figure out, you know, what we could interplant in with cannabis. I mean, I've tasted some living soil weed where I was like, what did you guys interplant next to the cannabis? And then I would go in the garden and it was like some funky chicken going on. You know, it was like, you know, it's like onions. I'm like, but they're growing LCG. It's like, you know, so, you know, there's so much, we really don't know what's going on. We know a little bit about what's going on. So that's the thing. This is an infinite exploration and that's why it's so exciting. So I think it's important that we have an open mind and just try and figure out how we can continue to do this without, you know, destroying everything in our path, because then we'll have a future with it. That's kind of how, you know.
That was well said. Thank you, Nelson. Great question. What other questions do we have?
Last week, flushing, finishing, you mentioned sucrose. Do you guys think that are there, as far as flavor and stability, are there any techniques or things in the plant, last ditch effort in the last week that will make a significant impact? Or do you think that it is the cultivation style, how you steer a crop, what you add through the life of the plant that makes a much bigger impact?
Spray terps.
In my opinion, it's a combination, right? I mean, obviously it's what goes on throughout the life of the plant. But in that last week, when a lot of people, we used to flush with straight water and now we're using molasses, we're using sugar, we're using calcium, we're using an enzyme, we're using a bunch of different things now. And we've done side-by-side testing and we're getting significantly better results on the flavor profile.
By adding the sugar at the end?
By adding the sugar at the end.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Yeah, I do it the last 8 days. We're running in cocoa right now, but yeah, cocoa, we run the last 8 days and we probably water 4 to 5 times. And we're hand watering that because the molasses is so thick. But yeah, getting significantly better results. And same thing with the calcium, you're getting that white ash. That's where we're getting the white ash from, is using that calcium. And
Are you irrigating? Are you flushing with the calcium and the molasses at the end?
Correct.
Have you ever tried just adding bone meal at the last 3 weeks?
We have not, but that's a great thing to add.
It works out well and kind of does affect the flavor in an interesting way.
Interesting.
Yeah. Stromberg taught me that one.
Nice.
Yeah.
He's a smart cat.
Very smart guy. Yeah.
Great question. Thank you, Jack. What other questions? So the question is, if we can wave the magic wand and we can edit one gene in the cannabis plant, what would it be?
Oh yeah, turn those thiols and sulfur-based compounds back up. I think that's what I see. I would love to see some of that happening. And I think CRISPR is probably a smart and safe way to do it. I mean, once you understand how CRISPR works, I think something like that is very reasonable and I think very achievable. It's like obviously we can breed towards those things, but I think for gene editing, it would be really interesting to be able to turn some of those back up.
Which was the one that you said, James? I missed the beginning.
Sulfur-based compounds,
sulfur-based compounds.
Styles, flavorants, however you want to. Yeah.
Oh man, that's a tough one. I'm a grower number one, like you said, classical grower. So I would probably have to go with some sort of pathogenic pressure reduction. That would be what I would go with.
So just overall plant health, immunity, resistance.
I mean, typically, it takes a lot to be able to start the crop and end the crop, and in a commercial stint. And obviously, I'm going into a realm of GMO, kind of scenario. But for myself, that would be, if I could wave a magic wand for myself, and then maybe not everybody else, that would be what I would choose.
I totally agree. Upregulating resistance genes for sure, and secondary metabolites. Yeah.
Yeah, it's hard to decide. Are we going super specific or are we going broad? Both. If I'm hitting one thing specifically, it'd be fusarium resistance. I think more people have that than they realize.
I think more people have fusarium than hop latent viroid, to be honest with you.
And they confuse it too.
100%. Yep.
All the time.
No doubt about it.
Mine would be like a viroid resistance, or maybe can have the viroid but doesn't express it. We've seen that in a bunch of cultivars. But what's happening with like a handful of viroids right now has really impacted the industry in a negative way, and that's something that we've observed. Justin has observed some plants that are positive, but they don't express the symptoms. So we have that. We have like a good starting point. So that would probably be like the biggest positive impact. And also people's when I'm writing licenses or when I'm writing applications for states, right? One of the things that they talk about is the Department of Ag regulations, and that the Department of Ag has the power to come shut down the farm if there's a pest or a viroid pressure that's noticed. None of that is being regulated or enforced in cannabis. And what's happening is we're having plants with a lot of problems being spread all around the country that could devastate food production. Because a lot of these viroids came from lettuce or raspberry, and they're going to bounce around. And then we have evolved pests that come from people that don't know what they're doing, applying pesticides at the wrong intervals and at the wrong concentrations. So we have kind of like this little nuclear bomb that's going to be a really large black eye for cannabis, unless we start providing some solutions where that's not going to be as big of a threat. So that would be my number one thing, because for me, like all the quality stuff is great, but I think about the meta of the industry. And with us being a fragmented market across all these different states without any federal oversight, which we probably won't have much of if things continue to go the way they're going in the country, because a lot of those agencies that protect our food supply are being kind of ripped apart and devalued. So that would be the first thing. And that should, if you do that work, throw us a bone, man. Love you long time.
mRNA silencing, guys. That's what it's about, right? Yeah. They're working on it.
Thank you.
They're working on it.
Oh, sweet.
Yes.
All right. I'll buy you a beer.
So we've got sulfuric compounds, pathogen resistance, viroid suppression. And if you can do one thing about day 21 and day 42 for the plant just to defoliate itself off 5 to 7 leaves off the apical meristem, sign me up.
Drop all the leaves right now.
No, that's fascinating work that MyFlora is exploring. I mean, there's a lot of fun stuff that's happening there. The exploration of some new tissue culture program that's coming through with a lot more speed. And, the Genesis program is something that we're excited for. So thank you guys for focusing on the solution of time. That's the one thing that we cannot get back, is the time of how long it takes to go through culture. And I think talking from a commercial perspective, the plants just have to be clean enough to get produced clones into the next stage. So healthy moms, yes, that's what we need. And if it's not 100% clean, and Nelson, I'm glad you brought up that there's irresponsible sharing of genetics and just plant material all over the place, because it's not regulated the way that it needs to be. There's no phytosanitary certificate. There's no we're basically self-policing each other by saying, oh shit, you've got hops, you're spreading it out knowingly. Like that's the worst that can happen at this point, but there's really no impact.
And viral testing is like COVID testing, right? So it's 70% accurate, something like that. So you have to do multiple tests. Most people that are doing the HLVD testing, they'll get one test and be like, I'm clean. And I don't know if they took petiole root. I don't know where they took the root. Did they get it from the root crown or did they get it from a feeder root? Like there's all these things. Like one of the things I do when I'm consulting is go see, have you tested your plants? No? Okay, we're going to go through it. Then I'll watch them do it and I'll come back a month later and they're doing it totally off the SOP. So, it's just, it's a tough spot to be in. And, everyone in the cannabis industry kind of likes to slip and slide around ethics. And they weren't really taught the importance of it. And then we have a government that set up programs that don't reward ethical behavior. So it compounds this whole problem as far as the paradigm that we're in. But there is a huge cost on the other end of this. And, I ring that bell to the hate of a lot of people. And hopefully some people are understanding that like we all need to really get together and self-govern ourselves around some of these things. Because when the cost gets actualized, it'll be too late.
Guys, I'm sure we can go on for hours more about this whole topic. And again, this is a series, right? The science of flavor, the science of smokability. There's a whole lot that we can continue to cover, which again, going into dry cure, 60/60 is not the solution for everything, right? There's going to be variances. Genetics play a huge role.
I got one interesting fact about why we go 60/60 and why 60 is the temperature that we dry at. Why is that? It's because that's as low as the ACs would go. Like literally, that's why we dry at 60 degrees.
Spot on, bro. That residential unit
does not go.
Would
below
you
60.
dry lower if you could?
I don't think so, but that's where it came from, right?
Right. It was like we got to keep it cold because that's going to preserve things. That's the rationale.
Right.
Yeah.
You got to lean into that
Low and
facility
slow.
Well,
competence.
I see I'm not getting in trouble, but I see people still like talking about the colder the better. I'm like, no. That's not how it works. Like I dry at like 72 degrees and 60%. I'm like riding the edge of a 55 degree dew point, and then I'll get it to a point where it's like going to be trimmable. But I can hold those plants in that room for fucking weeks and they don't lose quality. As long as you have the right systems to do it. And people trip out, but the oil will protect a lot of those volatile chemicals in the plant that we chase. But and all that aroma you're smelling in the dry room is you just losing value.
100%.
On that note, I want to throw a shout out. Thank you so much for Indoor Sun Hydro for hosting us, the home of the CoNNect. Thank you, Kevin and team. We really appreciate you guys. To all of our sponsors, we have Kayakor, United, Faven, Arroya, Hygrozyme, Friendo. The list goes on. Everybody that's here, booth sponsoring, activating, getting in front of the culture, the cultivators, the retailers, the scientists, guys, we're here. This is what the CoNNect is all about. We really appreciate your time. Shout out to Savannah for blessing us with the beautiful music in between the panels. Round of applause for Savannah, please. We appreciate you. Thank you all for coming out to the CoNNect. We will be back here in July, rocking with Faven. Thank you guys. Much love.
I'm here with Sergio from the CoNNect community, Powerhouse, all these amazing things, dude. What an event you put together, man. This was great. Those panels were awesome. Dude, how are you doing?
Well, first, James, thank you for coming out, man. This is something that we've talked about for a while now. This panel in particular, both of these panels were highly curated, right? The perspectives of everybody that came through, the science of flavors and smokability. I mean, there's so much subjective, old school tactics that we've used along the ways, and now we're using science to measure and quantitatively put those old tactics into the process. So,
well, I love how you curated each group properly. It's like I feel like you picked each person specifically for their role and what they do, and you matched it up really well.
I appreciate you recognizing that, because that's truly what I love about the CoNNect is I'm a student. I want to learn from the best in all the different perspectives. So the CoNNect has evolved into what it is today because people are willing to put in their time. You guys came up from the Bay, like you spent the day with us at Powerhouse first to see the facility. Now you're here and it's, damn near 10 o'clock almost. And we just wrapped up the panel discussion.
Long 12-hour day.
It's a long 12-hour day, man. But no, it is great because people are seeing that network sharing and just understanding that there's still so much to learn. right? We were all learning from each other.
Well, and that's the beauty of it. Like, I feel like everybody on the panel picks something up from somebody else, you know, and everybody has their own specialties. And we're in a beautiful time where we have people that are the experts in what they do.
Right.
And getting all these people on the panel together, it's just, it was a lot of fun too. I think we had a really fun group. It was light, but it was still very informative.
I couldn't agree more. It was, and that's what we try to do with these panels, right? They're not just talking heads on slides. Like, of course, I love to incorporate a couple of slides for cool visuals and stuff, but you know, everybody that, like, starting with the first panel, you know, my takeaway, my goal for that panel was to have, you know, the curator and the science behind it. What is that technique? What are we measuring by sticking our nose in the bag and, you know, really being able to control the way that we pack a doink and how big that that tip is. All these things that lead to smokability. Let's put some quantitative measurements around there, and water activity was what I was really hoping to get out of it, because ultimately when you're trying to scale a brand, you cannot be the QC person everywhere. Right. And so being able to kind of put that into play with a water activity meter like the Aqualab, that is something that you can start to standardize with certain genetics, with certain expressions, with maybe you have a different water activity expectation for LED versus HPS. And so, you know, that was, everything happened out of that first panel. And the second panel that we had, James, was greater than I expected. Yeah. I knew that just having that much diversity of qualified subject matter experts in one stage to just rip off of each other was awesome.
Yeah. Yeah, I know it was great. And Nelson contributed a lot. It was good. He always has a lot of good things to say.
Yeah, it was.
So tell me about the next event.
So the next event, so we're on a roadshow. So the goal for this year is to have one CoNNect every month, and we're trying to make it out to major markets. So last month in March, we were out in Massachusetts for the NECAN. This month, we're back in Sacramento. Next month, we're going out to Michigan. And then in June, we'll be out in Berlin at Mary Jane.
Dude, I can't wait. I'm going to be there. We're going to have to do some stuff together. I'm going to be with Grove, and I'm also going to be selling seeds with Greenhouse.
Incredible.
So it should be a lot of fun.
It's going to be a great time. And last year's Mary Jane was a vibe. I mean, 60,000+ people. Yeah. Like, that was popping. So, you know, we definitely want to get some more networking opportunities, get some more discussions, getting global perspectives outside of where we're at right now. So yeah, man, looking forward to it. But again, thank you for coming out, the James Law podcast, being here with the CoNNect. This is truly an honor. I mean, this is amazing here. So
yeah,
thank you.
You did good with the backdrop. The backdrop's epic. Yeah, and we can keep using this. We can keep running with this. It's great.
Right on, man. Well, James, again, thank you so much for coming out to the CoNNect, brother. We appreciate you.
Absolutely.
Thank you to everybody coming to Sacramento. Shout out to Indoors and Hydro for hosting us, as always. And really
Gears
appreciate
and Grit, big shout out to Gears, all the guys that contributed, because it's so many more people than just the two of us talking here. You know, it's like literally, it's a big team effort from so many people.
It truly is. It's a community. That's it. We're all here to connect and level up with each other. Appreciate you guys. Much love.
Peace. Thank you guys for watching. Please like and subscribe down below.